Hitler had the supreme fascist state. And what was he worried about in Europe and in Germany? He was worried about white genetic annihilation. What is everybody in Europe worried about now? White genetic annihilation.
Now, what might make people want to have more children? It's a question facing many countries as birth rates around the world continue to plummet. So far, few, if any, policies have worked. So, what can be done? Alice Evans is a senior lecturer in social science of development at King's College London. David Canning is Professor of Population Sciences at Harvard University. They've been talking to Rima Ahmed.
The fundamental problem is that for our collapsing fertility rate, which is happening worldwide, has massive, massive economic consequences. Because as our populations age, that elderly population will be increasingly dependent on a very, very small workforce. So that creates a massive pension time bomb. So economically, if we want to have a wealthy, prosperous society and a decent safety net, we really need to get fertility up.
How can we do that, though? Because it's not just about women not wanting to have babies, is it, Alice? Because that's usually the narrative that we hear.
So a key underrated factor in falling fertility is the rise of singles. So previously, in my grandparents' age, for example, women got married and pumped out babies. But as societies liberalise and stigma fades, people can afford to be choosy. And this is the biggest trend in the EU right now. So up from 2013, there's been a 20% rise in single adult households. It's increasingly men staying single. And this is worldwide. Marriages are, over the past 20 years, down by 20% in Turkey. They're down in Iran. They're down in China. They're down in South Korea. It's a one-on-one relationship almost with people staying single. And it's not just choosing single, but there's a more introverted life across many dimensions. People are spending less time with their family. People are spending less time with their friends.
David, I must ask you, in all of your research, is there any one overarching factor globally that is stopping people from having children? Because it does seem like there are different issues from, nation to nation, for example.
I would emphasize the social norms. I think the economic incentives approach hasn't worked very well. I think it's much more about social relationships, the way people live. It's about women working. And these things are really set in our culture. And I just don't think government is the right approach to deciding these issues. So I think we're actually moving into some agreement that it's institutions that should change to adapt to low fertility. Mm-hmm. You mentioned this problem that we need to have children to finance pensions for older people. I don't think that's correct. We can set up pension systems that are self-sustaining, where people save for their own retirement, and you don't need young people to pay in taxes to pay for those old age pensions. And so I do think there's a lot of change that is needed. One is that individuals need to change because of a longer lifespan, and societies have to change to a world in which people are going to live a long time, and we're going to have lower fertility. Sure. And I think that it's not a sensible approach to say we need children for economic benefits to us. That's not the reason I'm having children. I think it's not the reason most people are having children.
David Canning and Alice Evans talking to Rima Ahmed.
I heard people talk about anger on the Saturday program, and I was just thinking about that incident. And what I've been doing since that day is listening to specific music like Fela Kuti or Bob Marley. I might listen to old programs of Dr. Weldon, Neely Fuller, the Cows. And also I've been listening to motivational speakers. I think one is called, one of the guys is Eric Thomas, a black guy, and another guy, black guy is Les Brown. And that's been helping me out a lot. Like they still make like jungle noises and do weird things, but everything that I've been doing, and then along with working out, thanks to Emmy, I started working out again.
Today, many Americans are making a New Year's resolution to exercise more. It's well known that regular exercise is good for your health. But a new scientific consortium is revealing fresh insights into just how profound the benefits are for the human body. William Brangham spoke recently with someone who's helping lead this research, Ewan Ashley. He's a professor of cardiovascular medicine and genetics at Stanford University and the newly named chair of its Department of Medicine. And he calls exercise the single most potent medical intervention ever known.
Ewan Ashley, so good to have you on the NewsHour. You are undertaking this massive multidisciplinary study to understand how exercise changes our body in some fundamental way. But as I mentioned, don't we already know a lot of this? I mean, what is the importance of doing this much deeper dive that you're doing?
Well, we've known for maybe 70 years that exercise was among one of the most potent medical interventions known. We knew from studies in the 1950s comparing London bus drivers and London bus conductors that lived in the same environment, but the bus drivers were sitting, the conductors were standing, and the heart disease rate among the drivers was twice that of the conductors. So yes, we've known for 70 years that exercise is really, really good for you. But we have not, through that entire time, really understood how it works. So the new study was to bring together 17, 18 different groups from across the United States to really study, to build a molecular map of exercise, to try and work out how come this intervention that's so available to all of us is the most powerful intervention known. How does it actually work?
And so you've started to publish some of your findings. When you compare exercise to these other critical things that we know are important for health, diet or sleep or things like that, where does exercise fit in? What are the sort of top line findings of exercise's potency?
Well, one of the things that really surprised us, we're all exercise people already, so we were all convinced as to the benefits, although in this study, we also had a control group. So the first study we released was of rats that were sedentary, and then they were trained over the course of 8 weeks, aerobic training, literally on a treadmill. And then at the end of the period of time and at the end of several time points along that 8-week time period, we looked at the tissues from the rats. And the thing that we were really surprised to find was that really they turned into almost different beings. I mean, exercise was that potent. Every single tissue we looked at showed something completely different from before. It really changed the entire molecular makeup of the individual organs of the rats in a very positive direction. One example might be that multiple tissues, for example, fat tissue. Another example would be the mitochondria, that are little battery-like organelles inside each cell. When we looked at the changes with exercise, we often saw mirror image changes to the ones we see with disease. So exercise was quite literally kind of reversing in a mirror image-like way the changes that happen with disease and explaining a little bit about how exercise manages to protect from those diseases.
I mean, some of the other findings I read in your initial research is showing that exercise impacts the body in ways that we don't associate with exercise, the digestive system, the mood and mental health. How do you explain that mechanism being so widespread?
Well, I think one of the things is that exercise at the end of the day is a stress. And we don't recommend stress for anyone, certainly not work stress. But the reality is, I think, that stressing our bodies with exercise in just the right amount actually prepares our bodies to deal with the stress of everyday life. One of the biggest signatures we saw was in a system that basically tends to the proteins in our cells. So it helps them come together in the right format in 3 dimensions. It stops them sticking together and aggregating. And when it's time for those proteins to be renewed, it helps. It's called the heat shock response. And this was something that we saw changed across multiple tissues, across all the tissues, as you mentioned, lungs, skeletal muscle, heart, not just the ones that you might expect. We would expect perhaps skeletal muscle and heart for sure, but we were seeing changes in the kidney, in the adrenal gland, in the intestine, in the brain. And I think that begins to get at how exercise is just such a remarkable intervention, essentially helping with, for example, reducing the risk of heart disease by 50%, reducing the risk of many cancers by 50% and more, reducing the risk of back pain. People sleep better. They have better mood. They're able to breathe better. There are just so many ways in which exercise helps. And I think the key is just stressing you just enough so that your body then in recovery builds these mechanisms that help you deal with the stress of life in other ways.
And I understand there have been some interesting gender differences in your results. Can you explain a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think one of the other things we were really surprised by was just the extent of the changes. In this study, we had both male and female rats, and of course we expected to see some changes, but really the changes were profound. And we saw them both at rest before we started but also with exercise. Some things got closer together with exercise between the sexes, some things got further apart. And this was the case particularly in adipose tissue and in skeletal muscle, where we really saw very profound differences between the two sexes. And I think what it led us to believe is that really every study from now on should be done with both sexes. This is something we've known for some time, but over the history of science, we've tended, just because science costs a lot of money, to choose one or the other. We do studies in all males or all females or both when we could, but often the numbers were smaller then, and that gave us less power for discovery. What's really clear, I think, from this study is that we really have to do both sexes in order to really work out what the differences are and be able to describe them adequately for both sexes.
I know people listening to you will, of course, be wondering, I'm sure you get this question all the time, what kind of exercise, how often does it matter, when I do it, how much I do it? What does your research indicate?
Well, this particular research with the rats doesn't answer that question, but fortunately we have lots of research to give us a good answer to that question. And although you read lots of different things as every new study comes up, the overall advice has remained the same. The first thing is any movement is better than none. So if you're in a sedentary job or you're not used to moving much, then just stand up. Standing up is a good start. If you can walk, take some walking paces, go for a walk at lunchtime, that's great as well. If you can get 30 to 45 minutes of moderate intensity exercise, that's like a brisk walk. If you can do that 5-6 times a week, that's fantastic. And of course, if you want to do more, there's added benefit. One of the things I regularly tell my patients, I'm a cardiologist, is that 1 minute of exercise buys you 5 minutes of extra life, which means you definitely have time to exercise. Because even if you exercise even a little bit higher intensity, you get 7 or 8 minutes of extra life. So you definitely have time to make in your day to exercise. It doesn't matter whether you do it in the morning, at lunchtime, in the evenings, particularly good after meals. So the evening is a fine time to take a brisk walk. But the main thing is get up, move about as much as you can.
You and Ashley of Stanford University, such fascinating research. Thank you so much for talking with us about it.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Today, the U.S. Surgeon General is releasing a new advisory linking alcohol and cancer. Vivek Murthy joins us now to talk more about it. Surgeon General, welcome back.
Thanks so much, Steve. Good to be with you again.
First, thank you for not releasing this report on New Year's Eve, because that would have been a bummer.
You're welcome.
Okay, appreciate that. Why issue the warning now, though, at this moment in history?
Well, alcohol is the third leading preventable cause of cancer behind tobacco and obesity, Steve. And in this advisory, what I lay out is the causal link between alcohol and cancer, and the fact that it's now linked to 7 types of cancer: breast, colorectal cancer, mouth, throat, voice box or laryngeal cancer, esophageal, and liver cancer. Just to put this in perspective, alcohol is responsible for about 100,000 cases of cancer in the United States each year and 20,000 cancer deaths. But most people don't know about this link, and that's the key reason why I'm putting out this advisory today.
Is the science more definite than a few years ago? Do we know more about this link?
We do. The science has been building for years, creating greater and greater certainty about more and more types of cancer. But what is clear is that while people know, for example, about the link between tobacco and cancer and other health risks in cancer, less than half of people in America know that alcohol is in fact connected to cancer risk.
Does it matter if you drink a lot or in moderation?
It turns out it does. That's a really good question. It turns out that more consumption of alcohol increases your risk of cancer. So we see significantly lower risk at lower levels of consumption.
Okay, so now I'm thinking about how to measure this risk. I mean, honestly, there's so many risks with alcohol. In fact, there are already warnings about drinking during pregnancy, drinking while driving, obviously, operating machinery, various other health problems. Is cancer even the main thing to worry about here?
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned those other risks, because on alcohol-containing bottles, there is, in fact, a Surgeon General's warning that mentions these two risks: drinking during pregnancy and drinking while operating a car or heavy machinery. And what I have called for in this advisory is that the Surgeon General's warning label be updated by Congress to include a third risk here, which is the risk of cancer. We've seen in the first two cases that when people were warned about these risks, they became part of our common knowledge. They sort of just shape our behavior. And what I want people to know here is that while we don't have data to give us a precise level at which every person can drink and minimize the risk of cancer, the exact level that's right for each individual does depend on their own risk of cancer based on their genetics, their family history, environmental exposures. But the two critical things that the data does tell us is that, one, there is a significant increase in risk of cancer going from, at the current levels that are within the guidelines. So that's 1 drink a day for women, 2 drinks a day for men. But second, that the patterns we see suggest lower consumption is equated with lower risk. So the bottom line is, if you drink regularly, keep in mind that less is better when it comes to reducing your cancer risk.
Got it. Now, I want to note for people, you're heading out of office January 20th. President Trump has nominated a replacement, Jeanette Neshwat, who's a Fox News contributor, also a doctor in urgent care. Have you had many conversations with her as she prepares to take over, assuming she's confirmed?
I have not, but I'm looking forward to connecting with her and, to her or to whomever is confirmed as the next Surgeon General. One thing people may not know is that we have a strong fellowship among those who have served in this role. We are friends with each other across Republican and Democratic administrations. We help each other out and support each other. And if she is to serve as the next Surgeon General, if she's confirmed by the Senate, then certainly she'll be a part of that group as well.
One other thing is on my mind, because you've issued a number of warnings during your time in office. I think sometimes about the famous 1964 Surgeon General's warning on smoking. My parents heard that and actually just quit smoking. They still had their old lighters when I was growing up, but they did not smoke at all. People listened to the Surgeon General. Do you think people listen to the Surgeon General the same way today?
Well, I think people still do listen to the office, but I'm certainly aware that there are many types of or in pathways through which people get their information these days, many more than back in 1964 when the tobacco report came out from our office. But back then, when that report did come out, the very next year, Congress passed legislation for a warning label, and we started to see a big national effort come together where parents, community leaders, schools all came together to build campaigns to reduce tobacco use. And that, in my mind, has been the power of this office in history. And during this term as well, we've seen the issues we have raised around youth mental health, loneliness and isolation, social media, and youth mental health have driven national conversation and behavior change. And my hope with this advisory on alcohol and cancer risk is that we can contribute to change as well and help people ultimately be healthier.
And you're calling for, of course, another act of Congress. Vivek Murthy, the Surgeon General, it's been a pleasure talking with you over the years. Thanks so much.
Thanks so much, Steve. I appreciate you.
Bush and Dukakis on crime. Bush supports the death penalty for first-degree murderers. Dukakis not only opposes the death penalty, he allowed first-degree murderers to have weekend passes from prison. One was Willie Horton, who murdered a boy in a robbery, stabbing him 19 times. Despite a life sentence, Horton received 10 weekend passes from prison. Horton fled, kidnapped a young couple, stabbing the man and repeatedly raping his girlfriend. Weekend prison passes. Dukakis on crime.
There is new data out that show the number of murders in this country is declining rapidly. Crime was, of course, a central focus of the presidential election, with President-elect Trump portraying crime as out of control. And a majority of Americans believe that crime is increasing. William Brangham is here with a look at what the numbers tell us. William?
Nick, data collected from hundreds of law enforcement agencies show the murder rate dropped 16% compared to last year. In San Francisco, homicides have fallen by a third. Chicago recorded its lowest number of murders since 2019. And rates of other crimes also fell. Car thefts declined by roughly 20%. For a closer look at what this means, we are joined by crime data analyst Jeff Asher. He's the co-founder of AH Datalytics and creator of the Real-Time Crime Index. Jeff Asher, so good to have you on the program. When you look at all of this data that you analyzed, what stood out to you the most?
I think the scope of the decline in murder stands out, certainly. Right now, we have over 300 cities worth of data through October showing murder down 16%. Last year, the FBI had murder down 12%. For some context, the largest one-year decline ever recorded prior to last year was a 9% decline in 1996. So it's not just that we're seeing a decline in murder. It's not just that we're seeing murder relatively returning to where it was pre-pandemic, but we're seeing by far the fastest one-year declines last year and then again this year. And it's been a phenomenal trend to be able to follow.
What is your understanding as to what is the most plausible explanation for what is driving this decline?
I think the most plausible explanation is a combination of, one, just sort of everyday life getting back to normal, the stresses specific to the pandemic going away, and two, a lot of the tools that we would ordinarily use, both policing and non-policing, to interrupt these cycles of violence, which sort of erupted in the summer of 2020. We didn't have those tools in 2020 and 2021 and even much of 2022. Now we have those tools at our disposal, and in a lot of cities, we're seeing murder and gun violence return to and even exceed where it was pre-pandemic.
We're seeing also, as I mentioned, declines in other types of crimes, but overall crime declines, they were not universal. There are some places that saw either a plateauing or an uptick. Isn't that right?
Sure. I think we're looking at places like Charlotte, North Carolina, Baton Rouge, Louisiana, that had increasing murders. But for the most part, those are the outliers, and they're notable because they're the outliers. I believe in the latest real-time crime index, we had 40 cities that had seen a double-digit decline in murders and only 5 cities that had seen a double-digit increase. There's other types of crime that are maybe not seen as significant declines in terms of robbery and aggravated assault. We're seeing significant declines in burglary, theft, and a huge decline in motor vehicle theft after 4 years of increases. So yes, you can always point to things that maybe are either around even or even increasing in various cities, but with the majority of cities, the pattern tends to be decreases across the board.
Your analysis and all of the work that you do is clearly built on giving the average citizen a better window into what crime really does look like, both nationally and in their own city. But as you know, the perception of crime, people believe the opposite of what your data indicate. How do you explain that?
I think there's lots of little things that add up. The first is that there's a data vacuum. We don't have a lot of good, strong data, and that's the vacuum that we're hoping that projects like the Real-Time Crime Index can fill. The FBI doesn't put out its year-end numbers until 9 months after the most recent year ended. So, one, you're asking people to essentially not use data and use anecdotes, and they're always going to have a bias towards how many murders have I seen on the news recently rather than how many murders did I see last year at this time. I think other challenges, the media doesn't cover the planes that land. There's rarely stories, and I've done far fewer of these interviews where you're talking about declines in murder, even though it's a record decline, than were being done in 2020 and 2021, where we're seeing big increases in murder, big increases in gun violence. And then you talked about at the beginning, partisanship is playing a role. 90% of Republicans, 28% of Democrats, and 60-something% of independents think that crime rose over the last year. And we're not seeing necessarily enormous just crime disappearing from American society. So you would expect to see maybe a 40, maybe 50% of the public thinking crime rose, that you have this enormous gap between how Democrats and Republicans see perceptions suggests that they're being fed very different stories about what's actually happening in terms of crime in the country.
What is your sense as far as the practical impact of people not understanding reality with regards to crime? I mean, what difference does it make?
Well, I think it has enormous differences in terms of, one, it's not healthy for people to be afraid. It's not healthy for people to think that they're going to get mugged every day or that they live in some crime-ridden dumpster that nobody would want to live in, when reality is things may be in their city getting a lot better. I think the other real challenge is that if we create a world where either crime is rising or the data is wrong, then we're never able to understand why are things getting better. Is it something we're doing? Is it randomness? Is it a policy that nobody's thinking of that's having an effect that we didn't expect? How can we understand successes is just as important as how can we identify and reverse failures? Because if we're having successful reduction policies, it's really a shame on us if we let this moment pass without seeing why these are happening and what we can do to extend it and what we can do to make this happen in places that are not currently seeing declines.
All right, Jeff Asher of the Real-Time Crime Index, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for having me.
A Mother's Reckoning. Living in the Aftermath of Tragedy by Sue Klebold. Read by the author.
After being the first parent convicted in a U.S. mass school shooting, the mother of the Oxford high school shooter is asking a judge for bond while serving her 10-year sentence. Earlier this month, Jennifer Crumbley filed to have her involuntary manslaughter convictions thrown out. Shantae Passmore follows the latest legal twist involving the mom.
First, an attorney representing Jennifer Crumbley called her trial a sham prosecution. Now her team is seeking bond as she fights to toss out her involuntary manslaughter convictions.
We find the defendant guilty of involuntary manslaughter.
In a 1-2 legal punch, the Oxford high school shooter's mom is not only fighting to throw out her convictions, also her release from jail. Did Jennifer Crumbley have a duty to protect the victims of the Oxford high school shooting? In February, a jury deliberated and said yes. However, her new lawyer believes she should have never been tried in the first place based on that legal argument. In a statement to Local 4, her team said in part, Mrs. Crumbley has committed no crime, has never harmed anyone, and is certainly not a flight risk. So there is no reason to deny her right to freedom, while an overreaching prosecution attempts to pin the failings of a nation on the backs of parents. It also blasted Oakland prosecutors for orchestrating secret agreements with key witnesses, a claim prosecutors deny. Retired judge and defense attorney Vonda Evans.
Let me tell you something. It's called a shotgun effect. We're going to put everything out there and see what sticks. That's what you do. And, you get one opportunity to really do it well for it to really make a difference. So you want to bring out everything.
Also earlier this month, a judge denied the Oxford school shooter's motion to withdraw his plea and motion for resentencing. Shantae Passmore, Local 4.
Oakland County prosecutors say Jennifer Crumbley was tried for her actions and inactions leading to the Oxford high school shooting. In a new statement to Local 4, Chief Assistant Prosecutor David Williams says in part, the legal issues raised by Jennifer Crumbley have already been heard and rejected by the Michigan Court of Appeals. She should remain in prison serving her sentence while this matter proceeds through the appellate courts.
Let me say something that gets to the very crux of the matter, and this may be offensive for some to hear who are not on the side that we're on. White people, we have been the problem for 400 years.
Say that again.
Let me say it one more time for those of you who didn't hear me. White people, we have been the problem for 400 years.
Suspect arrested on suspicion of bias-motivated assault of Grand Junction man. This is Trump's America Now. A man chased down and choked a journalist working for Grand Junction broadcasters KKCO and KJCT in front of the news station's offices after berating them about their nationality, police say. Patrick Thomas Egan, 39, was arrested Wednesday on suspicion of second-degree assault and bias-motivated crimes, both felonies, as well as harassment, a misdemeanor. Egan began following the victim earlier in the day near Delta and confronted them at a stoplight, according to Egan's arrest affidavit. The victim told police that Egan rolled down his window and said, "Are you even a U.S. citizen? This is Trump's America Now. I'm a Marine, and I took an oath to protect this country from people like you." The victim called the director of the news station, who told them to drive to the office, about a mile away. When they arrived, Egan got out of his vehicle and continued to badger them, demanding to see their ID. The victim tried to run inside the building, and Egan tackled and choked them until he was restrained by other KKCO/KJCT employees. Police said in a news release that the victim was medically evaluated at the scene. News director Matt Vandersmith declined to discuss the incident Friday. Egan's arrest affidavit states he was driving a car for Sunshine Rides, a ride-hail and taxi service, at the time of the incident. General Manager Kelly Milan told the Post that Egan was no longer employed by the company as of Saturday and said the alleged crimes were inconsistent with the values of the company. "We have a large, diverse, good team of over 150 people serving the community," Milan said. "We're just disgusted by what this person did, and we condemn it." Egan previously pleaded guilty to misdemeanor criminal mischief in Mesa County in 2019 and was sentenced to 30 days in jail, according to court records. He is in custody at the Mesa County Jail on $20,000 bail and is set to appear in court January 2nd.
Is that a real gun?
Yes, this is a real gun.
Do you kill people?
No, if some guy's hurting someone, I try to shoot him in the leg or something, just to stop him.
Mama says police misshoot black people. Is it true? Yeah, is it true? Is that true? Yeah, is it true? Is that true? Is it true?
Jackson County prosecutors report calls KCPD to fire officer who killed 3 people. An advisory board to the Jackson County Prosecutor's Office calls for the Kansas City Police Department to fire an officer who has killed 3 people and faces several other excessive force allegations, according to a report released Friday. Jackson County Prosecutor Gene Peters Baker released the 55-page report from the Prosecutor Office's Community Advisory Board, which examined the killing of 47-year-old Donnie Sanders and other police shootings in the past several years. The officer who killed Sanders, Blaine Newton, was not named in the report, but his identity has become public through lawsuits and numerous news articles. Newton was not charged in the March 2020 killing of Sanders, but among the advisory board's recommendations is for the KCPD to fire him. KCPD should reconsider the employment status of the officer who fatally shot Donnie Sanders to ensure that this officer no longer poses a risk to public safety, the report said. The Kansas City Police Department was reviewing the document, a spokesperson said Saturday. "We were not included in the discussions or the details prior to release," said Officer Elena Gonzalez, a spokesperson for the Kansas City Police Department. In an introduction to the report, Baker said Police Chief Stacey Graves had reviewed and commented on the report's findings. "Graves embraced some findings and directed us to key issues we had not considered," Baker wrote. "We were able to discuss this report's suggestions in a thoughtful and helpful way." Baker called the report a first-of-its-kind examining officer involving shootings. "The concept of reviewing and addressing an officer-involved shooting beyond criminal charges is novel," Baker wrote. "It is also necessary, however, if we are to effect change to processes and policies that govern these incidents." Fatal shooting of Donnie Sanders. On March 12, 2020, Newton was patrolling near 51st Street and Prospect Avenue when he made a U-turn and started to follow Sanders. Newton, who suspected Sanders of speeding, followed him as he turned into an alley between Wabash Avenue and Prospect Avenue. Newton then turned on his lights and sirens. Sanders drove nearly to the end of the alley and parked his Chevrolet Tahoe. He then ran and Newton chased after him with his gun drawn. Dash camera video from Newton's police cruiser doesn't capture the shooting, but Newton can be heard yelling commands for Sanders to stop and show his hands. Newton then fired 5 shots, striking Sanders 3 times. Newton told investigators that he saw what appeared to be a gun in Sanders' hand. No gun or weapon of any kind was found at the scene. Sanders had only a cell phone in his right jacket pocket. Prosecutors declined to press charges against Newton following an investigation by Kansas City Police and the Missouri State Highway Patrol. Baker had determined that the account provided by witnesses backed up Newton's defense that he feared for his life when he shot Sanders. Could not have issued citation for speeding. The report noted that though speeding was suspected, Newton had no radar and there was no evidence that he was specifically trained in assessing speed. Further, he only briefly spotted Sanders as he was passing him traveling the opposite direction, the report said. A review of the dashcam is far from dispositive that Sanders was speeding, yet the officer guessed that Sanders was driving roughly 10 miles per hour over the limit. The report also noted that without additional evidence, such as a readout from a radar gun, Newton could not have issued Sanders a citation for speeding. The report said Sanders was pulled over for something known as a pretextual stop. That is where police stop a driver on a technical violation of a traffic ordinance that does not immediately impair public safety, when the officer's true motivation is to investigate some other crime, despite lacking probable cause or even reasonable suspicion. Pretextual stops impact black drivers at a higher rate than white drivers, the report said. The report also questioned whether Newton should have initiated the foot pursuit. Foot pursuits produce a net cost that rarely outweigh the net gain, the report said, noting that several departments prohibit or greatly discourage chasing people with guns drawn. Newton, who has been with the department since 2017, has previously been the subject of excessive force allegations. In addition to the Sanders killing, Newton shot and killed 2 others and injured in another shooting on June 9, 2023. Newton was driving near East 31st Street and Van Brunt Boulevard when he saw a person on the driver's side of a truck point a firearm out of the window toward a white van and drove off. Dashboard camera video reviewed by the Star showed Net1, who had been behind the truck, pull up to the passenger side of the white van and immediately opened fire. The passenger in the front seat, 42-year-old Marcel Nelson, who was armed, died. The driver, 42-year-old Kristen Fairchild, who was not armed, also died. A teenager in the backseat was also struck. Earlier this month, a woman who accused him of assault and battery in Platte County Circuit Court reached a settlement agreement for $65,000. The suit accused Office Newton of assaulting Burmika Mitchell of Lansing at a Platte County Walmart in September 2022 while he was off-duty but in uniform. A lawsuit filed by Sanders' family against Newton is pending in U.S. District Court in the Western District of Missouri. The report made several recommendations, including limiting pretextual stops, discouraging officers from foot pursuits and establishing a liaison officer to assist families of persons killed by KCPD officers.
When you're a cop, you can shoot a motherfucker by the trailer park. Plenty evidence, should eventually raise your shark. Then turn around and taser perp, for blazing perp, I'm a cop.
Yeah, Evan, DA Behenna said she was surprised the case was taken from her office, and body camera video shows exactly what happened.
So I'm writing and issuing you a citation for improper U-turn.
Attorney General Gentner Drummond says criminal charges against Oklahoma City Police Sergeant Joseph Gibson will be dropped. Earlier this month, District Attorney Vicky Behenna charged Gibson with aggravated assault and battery after this incident.
We don't argue on the side of the road. We argue in court. Yes, that's how it works. Because if not, if you don't sign this, you go to jail. Okay? I don't want to take you to jail.
I'm ready to go to jail.
You ready to go to jail?
Yeah.
Ridiculous.
Oklahoma City Police gave us Gibson's body camera video from that day. It all started with a traffic incident with the 71-year-old.
Where your vehicle was located, your vehicle was not like that.
Sit down.
No.
You sit down. Get on the ground.
In a statement Friday, Attorney General Drummond said in part, quote, "I will not permit Oklahoma police officers to face criminal prosecution for conduct adhering to their training." He also added, "The simple truth is this unfortunate incident would have never occurred if Mr. Vu had kept his hands to himself." Earlier this month, the Vietnamese American community of Oklahoma spoke out on the situation, saying Mr. Vu did not make an illegal U-turn, but was driving straight and was hit by another driver, which positioned his vehicle to look like he committed a traffic violation.
We seek, maximum penalty. We feel that he needs to be terminated. We feel that this police officer really needs to not be out there.
President-elect Nguyen declined to comment Friday. District Attorney Behenna gave us a short statement saying, "I am surprised and disappointed that Attorney General Gentner Drummond took this case away from my office and the citizens of Oklahoma County." The Fraternal Order of Police also gave a statement saying they offered their deepest sympathies to Mr. Vu and they never want to see anyone injured. They go on to say, quote, "Our members often have to make split-second decisions and they cannot control the outcome of every situation." Now, Oklahoma City Police offered no new comment today, but they did tell me there's an ongoing internal investigation on the matter. In Oklahoma City, Jason Berger, KOCO 5 News.
About as funny as a lynching.
Oh, hush, boy, you ain't even see it.
I've never seen a lynching either, but I know they not funny.
See? Shows what you know. I've seen funny lynchings.
No, you haven't.
I have so. Roscoe Patterson's lynching was funny.
Yeah, so them niggas was like, Roscoe, you better leave town for Mr. Charlie and them crackers gonna fall for you. I'm like, man, fuck these crackers, man. It's Roscoe Patterson. Nigga, I don't give a fuck. I just don't give a fuck. You know what I'm saying? White man can eat a dick. Eat my balls, nigga.
There he is. Get that nigger. Oh. Come on, let's go. Oh, shit, he's fast. Watch out. It wasn't really funny after that.
So you are the first state assemblyman that it was formally incarcerated. So you know what life is like. behind bars. When you saw this video, though, did it come as a surprise to you?
First and foremost, thanks for having me this morning, Hazel. No, it wasn't a surprise. You know, it reawakened the dormant feelings I had when I served time, just going through that experience. But what I seen on footage was just horrific. We watched murder on footage. It was a modern day lynching to me. And just to see Robert Brooks' reaction on that table, helpless, defenseless. Thank God for the audio, because you can't hear the agony and the screams which were reported throughout the facility. It was just horrible.
Yeah, I can hear the emotion in your voice, how hard this hits you.
I'm trying to contain it.
Yeah, it's awful.
It's horrible.
Some of the guards reportedly were sued before for cruelty.
Well, there's a systemic gang assault going on in these facilities. Assemblymember Damon Meeks and I, we tore up Mohawk and Marcy right after the event, and we found out a lot within those two facilities alone. There's a widespread of brutality in those both facilities, and it's why I'm calling for the closure. We have a unit there specifically that beats on incarcerated individuals. They call themselves the hit squad, and 5 of the officers that you've seen in the footage are part of the hit squads. So the incarcerated individuals in Mohawk and Marcy knows, hey, let's avoid this squad right here, if you know what's good for you.
Oh my! So they're known.
Oh, they're known. It's out there. It's known, and you know it's been quiet. You know, thank God that the camera, you know, the body cams were recording. Although it was off, it was recording.
But if they're known, how is this allowed to happen, and how are they allowed to remain employed there?
Well, we never had body cam catch it before, right? So it was always swept under the rug. Disciplinary hearings never favor the incarcerated individuals. They automatically believe officers, staff. So, you know, it's swept under the rug quite often. But Hazel, I am starting there are 42 prisons in the state of New York, 13 maximums, 26 mediums, and 3 minimums. I've been to every prison since elected, with the exception of the 3 I was in, Elmira, Mid-State, and Cayuga. But I'm going to revamp that. I'm going to visit every prison starting tomorrow and issue a report about every prison.
So, Assemblyman, Marcy and Mohawk facilities, why not clean house? Get a better culture in there? Why push for closing down the facilities themselves rather than maybe the personnel?
That's a good question. You know, so we thought about that when we first went, Assemblymember Damon Meeks and I. We thought it was just an isolated incident with 14 officers, few sergeants. Before we seen the footage, we just thought it was just an isolated incident. And then when we went into Marcy and into Mohawk and we talked to incarcerated individuals and staffers who were afraid to talk, we found out it's widespread. We have additional 43 officers' names and sergeants that we want to be brought up as well, in addition to the 14 who are being charged.
43 additional?
43 additional officers and sergeants. You know, one of the good things that Governor Hochul did was help secure the nominations for Commissioner Dan Monticello. He's a new commissioner, and I feel sorry for him. This fell on his plate. He's doing a great job, much more to do. But we got to follow this up, and you know, I think closing these 2 facilities is the right thing to do. It's written with officers who systematically abuse incarcerated individuals.
I mean, the Oneida Correction Facilities, they're now enforcing that these cameras be on and working anytime there's this type of interaction. Do you think that that's enough?
No, it's not enough. And if you look at some of the footages from Officer Mitchell and the 3 other officers, you look at their body cams, you know, they knew that with one point or another, the camera was on. So you see a sergeant come and turn it off. You know, you hide it, you know. Who are you going to believe, an incarcerated individual or an officer or a lieutenant or a superintendent? You know, when you file these charges on incarcerated individuals, they have no help. You know, so we kind of side with the system.
What else could be done, though, to safeguard? Because do you feel like anything would be foolproof?
Body cams is a big start.
Okay.
You know, again, you know, we have documented abuse in these systems. Let's talk about Corey Rise from one of the exonerated 5s. Reuben Wills, He was incarcerated at Marcy for about 7 years, abused 3 times. Now one of the biggest political consultants in the city.
Yeah.
It's documented. We just need change.
Had you ever witnessed anything like that?
I've witnessed and experienced it. You know,
you did experience it while you were inside?
Yes, right in that whole corridor, in that hub, the Oneida hub. So in the Oneida hub, you have Marcy, Mid-State, and you have Mohawk. When I was transferred from a maximum facility, Elmira, to Mid-State, that's where I experienced abuse by an officer.
And did you report it? Was it documented?
I reported it.
And what had happened?
Just swept it away. I'll give you another example. Just in Marcy, 3 days ago, Christmas Eve, Assembly Member Meeks and I, we talked to the incarcerated individual. He had a cast on, and he was afraid. He didn't want to talk because of retaliations. And getting him to open up, he shared. He said, hey, look, 4 days ago, 2 of those officers who are out there guarding this room right now broke my arm. And when we took me to the infirmary, his girlfriend works in the infirmary. So she didn't want to designate the arm broken, it was just sprained, and they wrapped it up in a gauze. So in agony, he cried 2-3 days. They finally listened, took him out to the hospital, and found out his arm was actually broken in 2 places, giving him a cast. Those are the things. These men are 5-6 hours away from the city, don't want to report it. The correction officers guard the mail, they guard the phone. There's no protection for them. And it's unfortunate because, you know, these young men and women experience abuse too in these prisons. You know, they're sentenced. They did something wrong in society. Their debt is to go into these prisons, rehabilitate themselves, correct their behaviors, and then come home. That's the debt to society. Do your time, come home. And none of those sentences, I've seen a death sentence, which Robert Brooks received.
Yeah. Let's hope this is the start of turning it around finally, right?
We're praying, you know. Again, you know, we have a great commission in Daniel Monticello.
Yeah.
We have a caring governor. Let's see if we could do something. I know they want to talk about policy, but I want to talk about closure because you send a message that, you know, abuse will not be tolerated, either by incarcerated individuals or officers.
Well, Assembly Member, thank you so much for your time this morning and for the work that you're doing.
Thank you for having me.
I appreciate your time.
Thank you for having
Eddie
us.
Gibbs, thank you for coming in this morning. We appreciate it.
All right.
I turned the ISO up on my camera, and I have this dark photo of this flag waving, and smoke is, tear gas is coming down, and there's hardly any more people up the top. It just was weirdly over. You know, I walked 2 blocks, called an Uber. I just remember looking at who my driver was going to be, and I was so relieved that this driver was a black man. Because I really, honestly couldn't deal with any more white folks that day. I couldn't. I was just over it.
As President-elect Trump returns to office, what happens to the QAnon movement? Adherents of that elaborate conspiracy theory gained a lot of attention during Trump's first term. He sometimes welcomed the support, and some of them joined the crowds that attacked the U.S. Capitol on January 6, 2021. NPR's Jude Joffe-Block asked where QAnon is now.
After a mob of pro-Trump protesters breached the Capitol through a broken window on January 6, the Huffington Post captured it on video. A lone Capitol police officer, Eugene Goodman, diverted the group away from the Senate chamber. The group chased him up a staircase. Leading the pack at the very front was a man wearing a black T-shirt with a large Q. That man, Douglas Jensen, later told the FBI he followed QAnon content online and had worn the shirt and put himself at the front because he, quote, wanted Q to get the attention.
Many of the people who participated in the events of January 6th were QAnon believers.
That's Logan Strain. Under the pseudonym Travis View, he co-hosts the podcast QAA. And for the last 6 years, he's been reporting on QAnon, which he calls an online extremist movement rooted in the belief that
Trump is secretly battling the cabal or the deep state, some sort of evil group of individuals who are really controlling the world.
Q supposedly refers to an anonymous high-level intelligence source close to Trump who left cryptic clues on online message boards. movements. In QAnon lore, there will be a reckoning known as the Storm, when these evil individuals will be punished. Catherine Keneally is with the nonprofit Institute for Strategic Dialogue, which studies extremism.
So January 6th was essentially supposed to be this culmination of everything that this figure Q had posted about.
Instead, more than 1,000 people who participated in January 6th have been criminally sentenced, and mainstream social media platforms doubled down on efforts to ban QAnon content. Yet,
the movement didn't go away by any means. It was just essentially moved and splintered into various networks.
There was a whole online ecosystem of QAnon influencers who'd figured out how to monetize spreading QAnon-related content and analysis. They moved to less moderated platforms like Telegram and Rumble. Some were even recruited to join Trump's social media platform, Truth Social, by Kash Patel, who's now Trump's pick to lead the FBI. Here's Patel in 2022 speaking on the MG Show, which has promoted QAnon.
We also need everybody on Truth Social because it's the only place where we can actually have a conversation without getting shut down by the clown show that is the censorship operation at Twitter and Facebook.
That same year, billionaire Elon Musk, who's now one of Trump's closest allies, bought Twitter and renamed it X. He allowed banned QAnon accounts to return. Both Trump and Musk have repeatedly shared QAnon content on social media. On the eve of the 2024 election, Musk shared a pro-Trump video.
The future belongs to patriots.
On screen, the word patriots appears, and the O changes to a Q. Analysts like Keneally call this kind of high-profile flirtation with QAnon alarming, especially given the violence on January 6th. At the same time, QAnon influencers are now celebrating the incoming Trump administration and his cabinet picks. Red Pill News, an online show which shares QAnon content, included this fake emergency alert in a recent episode.
Donald Trump is now your president. All deep state traitors are to report immediately to Guantanamo Bay detention camp for court-martial via televised military tribunal.
Still, there haven't been new Q drops in years, and there appears to be less interest in that kind of content, says Mike Rothschild, an author who's written about the movement.
QAnon as a movement based around secret codes and clues and riddles doesn't so much exist anymore, but it doesn't need to exist anymore because its tenets have become such a major part of mainstream conservatism.
Ideas QAnon helped popularize, like a battle against an evil deep state and anti-vaccine conspiracy theories, are becoming more widespread on the right. Jude Joffe-Block, NPR News.
The Turner Diaries. Sold over 500,000 copies. Who do you think is buying it? Eric Rudolph, the Olympic bomber, Wade Page, who shut up the Sikh temple, Larry Ford, developing typhoid and cholera, William Carr with the cyanide bomb, anthrax, ricin, botulism, C4, IEDs. I could go on like this for hours, and all of them are white supremacists.
In addition to the investigations in New Orleans and Las Vegas, the FBI needs help with an older mystery. Authorities want to find the person who placed 2 pipe bombs in Washington, D.C., the night before the riot at the U.S. Capitol in 2021. NPR Justice correspondent Carrie Johnson reports.
There's a $500,000 reward for information that leads to the capture of the person who planted explosive devices outside 2 politically sensitive buildings in D.C. nearly 4 years ago. David Sundberg's the assistant director in charge of the FBI's Washington field office.
We are convinced there are people that still know something, and over 4 years, allegiances might change, relationships might change, people might recognize that what doesn't seem as important to them might be a piece of this investigation that we could really use.
Authorities have conducted about 1,000 interviews and reviewed more than 39,000 video files. But the alleged bomber wore a nondescript mask, a bland gray hoodie, and black gloves. Only one thing stands out, a gray and black pair of sneakers with a yellow logo.
At the time of the placement of those pipe bombs, less than 25,000 pairs of those rather distinct Nike Air Max shoes have been sold.
For the first time, the FBI is releasing a new detail about the alleged bomber. It believes the suspect is about 5 feet 7 inches tall. The devices that person placed outside the Democratic and Republican National Committee buildings did not detonate, and any link between the bombs and the violence at the Capitol the next day remains of interest to investigators.
We're still in a stage where we're trying to identify the suspect, and without an identity of the suspect, it is hard to come to motive or intent, but we do believe we'll get there.
Sundberg says the FBI has a long memory. It took years to apprehend the man who bombed the Atlanta Olympics in 1996, and even longer to capture the Unabomber, who sowed terror for decades.
This is not something that the FBI is going to let go of. We simply can't have a case that we stop working that involves someone placing explosive devices inside a neighborhood in any American town or city.
Carrie Johnson, NPR News, Washington.
How does humanity develop? How does it improve? How does racism, if it can, recede despite the overwhelming power of history?
Well, I think that the what's difficult to understand is how it's kept going, how it has stayed so firm for centuries. I mean, we've seen improvements in the way people think about gay Americans, for example. And I think that had to do with understanding that this could happen in your own family. You can actually have a gay son or a gay daughter, and these people were people, as you understand people to be. But because white Americans can keep themselves separate from black Americans, there is a sense that this other will never be who I am. So if there is a way to get people to understand, I don't know. I can't answer that question. I don't know. You know, Robin Kelly says that we're going to need a surrealist moment. There's going to have to be something that breaks the continuum. Because until white women start giving birth to black babies, I think we are going to stay living in these incommensurable experiences.
It's Morning Edition from NPR News. I'm Steve Inskeep.
And I'm Layla Fadel. It's a common sight on Instagram. Millennial women in curated outfits sharing recipes, health tips, and parenting advice in spotlessly clean homes.
What you can expect is lifestyle content, food, lots of food.
Making a bone marrow whip is so incredibly easy. All you do is bake off the bones.
But some of these accounts are strategically spreading messages of hate. Lacey Lynn and Sensibly Shy are just two influencers who include anti-feminist and white nationalist views in their otherwise wholesome content.
Many of these women say they're eagerly anticipating Donald Trump's return to the presidency. Now, to be clear, not all accounts are the same. Not all traditional wives or trad wives, as they're sometimes called, are sharing bigoted content, but groups that track extremist movements say their ideologies are spreading and social media is key to recruitment.
To learn more, I spoke with Evian Leidig. She researches global extremism and has been an advisor to the U.S. Justice Department, the UN, and the Council for Europe. She's also a fellow with the International Center for Counterterrorism in The Hague. Her latest book is The Women of the Far Right. Leidig says that a lot of the people who follow these accounts are unaware of what they're looking at.
They come across this content and they don't often realize that it's leading them to this rabbit hole of much more extreme content.
Yeah, I mean, I can see how that happens because it was like looking at it, I'm like, oh, beautiful family, pretty. And then It's like, wait, where's this gun? And what'd she say about immigrants?
Yeah, exactly. So you picked up on the fact that there is a really diverse range of aesthetics. So that kind of cements in either the 1950s suburban housewife and a white picket fence, all the way to the hippie, bohemian, off-the-grid living, homesteading, aspirational lifestyle. But I think what unites these women is that they have very clear roles in terms of what they see as traditional gender divisions. And they also have a very strong opposition to feminism, regardless of the aesthetic that they promote on their accounts.
But is there anything dangerous about that? I mean, or is that just women preaching the life that they happen to be living?
So the moment that it does become problematic is when it gets tied into what they see as a white nationalist utopian vision for society. And this is when we start to see a lot of the white supremacist discourse come out, as well as quite a lot of coded language or subtle language. And it's not until you're actually immersed into this community that you actually start to pick up on those signals.
Now, if you could describe some of this coded language and the way that it leans into racist theories, anti-LGBTQ language, anti-immigrant views, I mean, how does that look?
So it often comes across in disappearing content like Instagram stories, which only last for 24 hours. They'll talk about LGBTQ individuals grooming young children in schools and in classrooms. We will also see a broad range of things like population replacement conspiracy theories. So this idea of the Great Replacement, for example, which is this notion that white people are being deliberately replaced by immigration in Western societies.
Is there a sort of coordinated effort going on here?
Well, I do think that there is a coordinated effort. A lot of these momfluencers were quite politically active in the so-called alt-right, which I noticed in the 2016 and 2020 elections. And for many of these influencers, they deliberately shifted towards posting about motherhood content because they wanted to showcase to their audiences what they hoped would be role models in terms of right-wing traditional families. So it really was a deliberate propaganda choice that they made.
These influencers are peddling in theories that end up being very, very dangerous. Is there anything being done about that?
There is unfortunately very little being done. These influencers are very adaptable. They know what is the gray area when it comes to being able to post content that sits just at that boundary between what is accepted and not accepted on these platforms. And at the same time, there is a gender blind spot when it comes towards recognizing the harms and the quite insidious role that these women do play on platforms.
Evian Leidig is the author of The Women of the Far Right. Thank you so much for your time and your insights.
Thank you.
White supremacy is a sickness. We begin today's show with what we know about the two apparent attacks that unfolded in the U.S. on New Year's Day and the response so far. The FBI has identified the driver of the Tesla cybertruck that exploded outside the Trump International Hotel in Las Vegas Wednesday morning as 37-year-old Matthew Livelsberger of Colorado Springs. He died from a self-inflicted gunshot wound to the head moments before his rented car, packed with fireworks and fuel canisters, burst into flames injuring 7. Livelsberger was an active duty member of the Army. He was a Green Beret and Special Forces Master Sergeant. From 2017 to 2019, he served 3 tours of duty in Afghanistan. Before that, he deployed to the Republic of Congo, Ukraine, and Tajikistan. Livelsberger was on leave from his base in Germany. FBI Special Agent Spencer Evans said Thursday investigators are still searching for a motive.
We know we have a bombing, absolutely, and it's a bombing that certainly has factors that raise concern. It's not lost on us that it's in front of, of the Trump building, that it's a Tesla vehicle, but we don't have information at this point that definitively tells us or suggests it was because of this particular ideology or any of the reasoning behind it.
The FBI says it has not found a link between the Las Vegas man and the suspect in the New Orleans attack earlier, just a few hours earlier on New Year's Day. Both men served in the U.S. Army, including overlapping assignments at Fort Bragg in North Carolina, what it used to be called. But there's no evidence they knew each other. President Biden Wednesday said the FBI had named 42-year-old Texas-born U.S. citizen, U.S. Army veteran Shamsud-Din Jabbar as the suspect who rammed his pickup truck into throngs of revelers on Bourbon Street early Wednesday, killing 14.
I've directed them to keep looking. The individual who ran at the truck that exploded in Las Vegas also served as active duty U.S. Army. and the FBI is working with the Department of Defense on investigating, including the service members' possible motives and all those he worked with.
Jabbar had posted 5 videos to social media in the last few hours before the attack, pledging allegiance to ISIS and discussing plans to kill his family. Both Jabbar and Leibelsberger were divorced. CNN reports Jabbar's second wife had a restraining order against him during their divorce case. Meanwhile, in recent months, Leibelsberger had reportedly removed pictures of himself from Facebook in which he proposed to his partner and cradled his newborn baby in his arms. On Thursday, President-elect Donald Trump blamed what he called Biden's open borders policy for, quote, radical Islamic terrorism, in apparent reference to the New Orleans attack. President Trump said once again that people coming from outside of the country were more dangerous than people at home. Soon after, President Biden said that the Texas man was a U.S.-born Army veteran. Meanwhile, Trump's incoming senior director for counterterrorism, Sebastian Gorka, also responded to the New Orleans attack. Gorka advised Trump in his first term, but was pushed out after The Forward revealed he once had ties to a Hungarian far-right Nazi-allied group and that he supported an anti-Semitic racist paramilitary militia in Hungary while he served as a Hungarian politician. Gorka spoke on the right-wing news outlet Newsmax.
You need to understand, every single one of our Newsmax viewers, you are on the front line of the war against global jihadism. It's not just our tier 1 operators. It's not just the guys at Dam Neck, the SEALs, or the guys over the wire at Bragg. You, like the people on Bourbon Street, are on the front line. So be aware, keep your head on a swivel. And if you hear people doing strange things, acting peculiarly, apparently this individual converted to Islam last year, you need to also share that information.
For more, we're joined by Mike Preisner, an Iraq War Army veteran who's been watching these developments closely. He previously co-founded March Forward, an anti-war group of veterans and active service members, and worked with Veterans for Peace and another group called About Face. He still works as a GI organizer. Michael Preisner joined the U.S. Army in 2001 when he was 17 and left the military in 2005. His company participated in the 2003 U.S. invasion of Iraq, where he served for a year. He hosts a podcast for service members called Eyes Left. In June, his report for the Empire Files was headlined, "Dozens Quitting U.S. Military Over Gaza in Protest, Voices of Hidden Unrest Within the Ranks." Mike Preisner, welcome to Democracy Now! Thank you for joining us from Portland, Oregon. If you can start off by responding to these 2 attacks. Now, again, the authorities say they see no connection between the 2. They think both men acted alone. They did use the same app to rent their cars. Leibelsberger rented in Denver an EV, one of those Tesla cybertrucks, which looks like a tank. And you have Jabbar, who launched this attack in New Orleans, used his car as a weapon, his EV pickup truck. But both men were in the military. You have Leibelsberger, a Green Beret, and you have Jabbar, who was in the military for more than a decade, now a military veteran. Talk about what took place on New Year's, Mike.
Right. Well, both of these incidents and individuals seem quite different, other than the fact that both of them seem to be triggered by relationship issues. But the main thing that links them is the fact that military service is now the #1 predictor of becoming what is called a mass casualty offender, surpassing even mental health issues as a profiler. You know, there are many different consequences of having a massive military empire, the biggest humanity has ever seen, both in its sheer size, its expanse around the world, one that is constantly engaged in endless and morally indefensible wars around the world. And one of those consequences is the violence abroad coming back against people at home. Leibesberger, of course, his career was one of killing. And then, the New Orleans attacker says he was inspired by ISIS. The mass killing ideology of ISIS. ISIS would not exist were it not for the U.S. military's complete destruction of Iraq and mass killing of innocent people. America in general, of course, has a mass violence problem. Mass shootings happen quite regularly, more than once a day on average. And that the reasons for that are linked to U.S. militarism, both in the kind of cultural domination of a country that glorifies violence and exports violence, but more so a government that is presiding over a country with deep and extreme social problems, which it refuses to address while having a blank and endless check for militarism abroad and an ever-increasing budget for the military-industrial complex. And so this gives rise to an extreme amount of social problems in our society that are rooted in things like alienation and inequality and desperation and despair and hopelessness. And then so the U.S. military comes in and for the purposes of recruitment must target people who are most impacted by those social problems. They bring them into an institution where they train them to kill. They train them that killing is actually quite honorable and quite cool. It sends many of those people to kill abroad. It has a very notorious for ruining people's mental health and a mental health system that makes people's mental health problems even worse, and then spits them back out into a society where people find their lives harder than when they join. That's kind of why I think that has become a number one predictor of becoming a mass casualty offender is all of those consequences. And we look at Fort Bragg in particular. You mentioned both these people passed through Fort Bragg. Fort Bragg was for 2 decades the hub of the global war on terror, in particular the special operations factor, which does some pretty dark stuff around the world. And so it's really no surprise that 2 of these people passed through this base and that they are just joining a larger number of people from the military who end up carrying out acts of violence on others. A lot of these are turned inward, and there's, of course, an epidemic of suicide and drug addiction and alcohol addiction and overdoses and things like that. But of course, when you have a scenario like that in our society, some number of those people will, instead of self-destruction, will move to the destruction of others, which is what we've seen with these 2 individuals.
And again, Fort Bragg is now called Fort Liberty because Bragg was an enslaving Confederate general, Braxton Bragg, a Confederate officer in the U.S. Civil War, and like a number of bases, it has been renamed. You talk about the violence, also an epidemic of violence against women on these bases. And it's always interesting in these mass casualty events, whether you're talking about a mass shooter in a school like Sandy Hook, to look at the attacker's relationship with women in the past. I mean, you have the Sandy Hook shooter killed his mother before, but often when domestic violence isn't taken seriously, you see the escalation of the violence, Mike.
Absolutely. I mean, and this is a problem that's endemic to the military as well. I mean, Fort Liberty, it's high rates of domestic violence, of murders even. Seth Harp, who's another anti-war Iraq War veteran, has also done really important work on this. And so, yes, I mean, there is, of course, many indicators. I mean, it comes back to this idea that we have this mass violence problem. There are many ways that the government could be stopping this, could be taking measures to get to the root of these things, but instead it just exacerbates them. And of course, the U.S. military is, there's so many cocktails in our society that allow these things to bubble over into violence against other people. The military is just, one of the stronger cocktails that exists.
And let's talk about Leibesberger, what we understand now happened. He's the Green Beret who drove that cybertruck that blew up in front of the Trump Hotel in Las Vegas. Apparently, he died of a self-inflicted bullet wound. Can you talk about soldier suicides?
Well, I mean, it's an epidemic, and it has been for a long time. I mean, it's something that, especially was exacerbated when the Iraq and Afghanistan wars began. You have people like Leibesberger who, deployed many, many, many times in special operations. He no doubt was involved in things that involved in killing all over the world. But the way that the military historically, and from my own experience, being in touch with so many service members who were struggling against this, the military's policy policy when it comes to mental health and suicide and things like that is to maintain the fighting force. And so the goal of the U.S. military when they're dealing with this epidemic within their ranks is to keep the fighting force active and keeping people deploying and things like that. And that's what we saw throughout the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. And so, of course, there's a great deal of this, in society writ large, but in the military in particular, some Leibelsberger who injured many people and could have killed some people as well. And so, on face value, it looks like he was just another statistic of someone from special operations or the military in general that killed themselves, but was doing it in this kind of spectacular way. Went out with a bang, which, with our corporate media that sensationalizes so many of these incidents, maybe was inspired to do something that, made a scene or something like that. But I think the suicide is, of course, a major problem in the military and in our society for the reasons that I mentioned earlier. And that, there's going to be some layer of those people that, want to turn that violence on other people as well as themselves.
An article in the Washington Post from about, a month ago is headlined, "Trump could hobble renewed fight against domestic terrorism, analysts warned." Now, this is really interesting. I remember when Obama came to office and there was a report on domestic terrorism, especially right-wing terrorism in the military. He was pressured not to have that report released. This is an ongoing issue. Then you have the misinformation that Fox put out on New Year's Day saying that the truck that was rented came over. This is the truck in New Orleans that Jabbar used, came over the border in the last 2 days. It was not minutes later that Trump didn't post on Truth Social that finally people have to accept that people who come from outside this country are more of a threat than people who are born here. And he attributed the minimizing of foreign threat to Democrats and the fake news media. Of course, he was wrong about this, and Jabbar was a U.S.-born, U.S. citizen, served in the military for more than 10 years. Mike.
Of course. Well, the Trump administration is going to use the New Orleans attacker to, feed into their right-wing agenda. The reality is that when we look at extremist attacks or violence from people who have been in the military or are still in the military, a very, very tiny number of those people you could say were inspired by Islamic extremism. But right-wing extremism is, in fact, a very prevalent and common thing, and has been throughout the entire history of the U.S. military. I mean, the Ku Klux Klan, the America's premier domestic terrorist organization, was one founded by military veterans. And throughout the entire history of the U.S. military, white supremacists and right-wing organizations have heavily recruited from and, been led by people who are in the military and military veterans as well. This all came to a head in the 90s, where the Oklahoma City bombing, but also you had neo-Nazi service members in the Marines commit a lynching of a black couple in Fayetteville, North Carolina. And then so there was this brief period of crackdown of the military on right-wing extremism, but when the Iraq War started going very badly and they needed bodies to continue to go to the Iraq War, they completely removed the restrictions on this kind of thing. And then, which has been exposed by many journalists, were knowingly bringing in right-wing extremists, some of whom were going into the military specifically to get training to bring back out into their organizations. And so today we have many far-right organizations like Atomwaffen Division, Identity Europa, Patriot Front, some of those organizations founded by veterans, but also who recruit heavily from the military and veterans as well. Like leaked documents from Patriot Front show that more than 20% of their applicants are young veterans or people who are still in the military. This is a real danger. The Oath Keepers. After January 6th, it was revealed that so many of the participants were military veterans. In fact, many from the special operations were really the tactical leadership of that assault, and many of whom had stashed large numbers of assault rifles and ammunition in hotel rooms that were very near the Capitol assault. And so, of course, this is something that should concern everyone. It's obviously, the real clear and present danger when we're talking about extremism from within the military. But the Trump administration has indicated that the problem in the military is, in fact, wokeism. And they may, be going after woke generals or things like that, which really means they will be going after trans people. But also, I think it's very concerning when we talk about what we should look forward to with the Trump administration, how they're going to combat extremism from the military. One of Trump's main program platforms on his 20-point program for his presidency, one of them was deporting pro-Hamas terrorists. And so, of course, we know that the Trump administration, when they say pro-Hamas, they really just mean pro-Palestine. This, I guess, brings me to the point that the military, as we've been discussing, really transforms people. In a lot of ways, it can tend to transform people in extremely negative ways. But a lot of times, people's military experience puts them in a positive direction and causes them to reject the violence that they were a part of, which is what we've been seeing the past year through the Gaza genocide, where large numbers of service members have been quitting the military, both publicly and privately, have been taking part in demonstrations to try to protest the U.S. role in it, and taking other really dramatic and heroic actions in that regard. And those are the kinds of people that Donald Trump and Hegseth and others who are going to be a part of the administration identify as extremists, when the real threat of right-wing extremism is going to go, of course, completely ignored because, that's really the base of the incoming administration.
Finally, Mike Preisner, a recent Guardian report headlined Trump Pick a Threat to U.S. Military's Counter-Extremism Effort. Experts warned, quote, Pete Hegseth, Donald Trump's embattled choice for Secretary of Defense, will struggle to handle the serious problem of extremism in the U.S. military due to his own far-right political views. Experts in the subject have warned. The piece quotes Christopher Goldsmith, an Iraq War veteran, CEO of the nonprofit watchdog Task Force Butler, saying, quote, I think it's going to be an absolute disaster. Pete Hegseth is a domestic extremist, he said. The Guardian goes on to note, quote, Hegseth, an Iraq and Afghan war veteran, was barred from attending Joe Biden's 2021 inauguration after a fellow National Guardsman accused him of being an insider threat and an extremist with problematic tattoos. Mike Preisner, your final comments.
Yeah, well, we are in a tumultuous time in America, both a time of heightened political violence and at a time of growing despair and growing inequality in this country. The military, being a cross-section of that U.S. society, experiences those things as well. And in that moment, there are going to be numbers of people in the military and veterans who are going to gravitate towards right-wing organizations and go the path that Hegseth went. There's going to be people who do the opposite, and there's going to be people that just turn inward into self-destruction and despair. And so that's why I think it's very important for progressive-minded people, to realize that there is a role we can play in reaching out to people who are in the military, who can go down a different path and can go down the path of the many heroic service members who have taken a stand, who have quit the military, and who have used their experiences as a force for good in this world. And, getting back to this main issue of that we have these deep-rooted problems in our society that give rise to these incidents of mass violence, service members and veterans, instead of being a number one mass casualty offender, so many of them can actually be a part of changing society and getting to the root of those issues and moving society forward, as they have historically in the past. Vietnam veterans leading the struggle against the Vietnam War, Iraq veterans leading the struggle against the Iraq War, and in both those incidents being decisive factors in those wars coming to an end. We have much bigger problems to address in society. Service members and veterans can very much be a part of solving them, and it's very much needed that we foster that among progressive people, because there is clearly a faction on the right wing that is very much already doing that and taking advantage of that, and of course is entering the highest seats of power with people like Hegseth.
Context of White Supremacy. Gus T. Renegade in for another broadcast, hopefully to share constructive information with non-white people, victims of white supremacy, on what white supremacy racism is, how it works, what we can do to get this here problem solved immediately. Today's date, first compensatory call-in of the so-called New Year, Saturday, January 4, 2025. So I have been told. Our compensatory call-in, always a review of what has transpired over the last 7 days, It is crazy. Well, I won't say crazy, but it is a testament to the events that have taken place since Sunday that the 39th president of the United States dies this week. It doesn't even get a footnote in the compensatory call-in. Not even a footnote. And I thought that was significant, not just because, suspected racist president dies. We talked about Jimmy Carter with Dr. Kenneth O'Reilly, his book Nixon's Piano, where he talks about how all of the U.S. presidents have reinforced, supported the system of white supremacy, racism, and he goes all the way from beginning. That book was published when Clinton was in office, so it goes through the mid-'90s, and we had him as a guest on the program in 2010, so we got Bush the second time around, some of his antics, Katrina, Iraq, all the rest of it. But he talks about Jimmy Carter, too, supporting the system of white supremacy, racism, and it was not lost on Gus T. I'm fresh off of my little California excursion, all this about Jonestown. Who was the president during the Jonestown Holocaust? Oh, it was Jimmy Carter. So we had to go back and find his statements and what did he say about all this. And then the folks like, didn't he have his wife posing, Rosalind, all posed up doing selfies with Jim Jones? Yes. And Wayne Gacy, the killer in Chicago. But anyway, yes, all of that is true. Wow. The timing of it all. But that all way backseat by the time we got to I mean, that's last year. That's, that is old hat, man. Poor Jimmy, he got bad all the way through, man. Like, got Jim Jones on my watch, and they blame me for it, and I don't even get another turn. They turn it over to Ronnie Reagan. He's a darn actor, and I can't. Lame, man. Lame. But that's how much has happened. Got to pay attention to the news at all times. Before we get started, invest. If you think the C.O.W.S, Context of White Supremacy, is constructive, hit the blog racism-notes.blogspot.com. racism-notes.blogspot.com. You'll see top right corner, PayPal button. Beneath the button, you'll see links for Cash App, Venmo, and PayPal. Enormous gratitude to all of the investors who have kept us on the air. If we get to next month, 16 years. Now, we may have been wasting time for almost 2 decades. That could be true. Many have said that, in fact. Hopefully not. Hopefully we have been accurate more often than not, helped non-white people, victims of racism, figure out a few things that we could do to replace white supremacy with justice immediately. And what does it mean to be white? Hopefully we've made some folks consider that question, maybe even come up with some constructive, accurate answers. You can also hit the wish list at Amazon. Me and Jeff Bezos appreciate you. Listed under Gus T. Renegade, also linked at the blog. Now, for one, I forgot yesterday we were on the broadcast for neutralizing workplace racism, and one of our listeners said that they were talking to a white man, and he, I guess, lived or might have even been born in the Seattle area, and he graduated alumnus of the University of Washington right down the road. And he said, oh, wow, who are some of the popular alums from the University of Washington? He said, Gus T has an honorary degree. He said, oh, shucks, thank you. They didn't say that. He said he listed off a few people. I don't know if he listed Bruce Lee or not, because I said, hey, that for sure should be, person named old Bruce Lee. But I don't know who he named. And so he said he named a few. He said, what about Ted Bundy? He's the white fellow. Said, yeah, Ted Bundy. As a matter of fact, I'm surprised you would even know that Ted Bundy went to school. I don't think most people don't even know that old Ted Bundy went to school at UW. Contraire, mon frere. Contraire. I say unequivocally, white true crime fanatics, white women, they know Ted Bundy, UW. Go Dogs. They know. And I said they should have a statue on campus to make sure that people are aware of this fact. But I mean, he wasn't just like some undergrad party. He was at the law school at UW. Like, come on. But yes, I think many people are aware of that, certainly around these. But I have to ask, I will ask. Maybe I'll even go hang out around the law school one day and ask and see how many of those folks are aware Ted Bundy went. And I'll sweeten and I'll say, did you know that Ted Bundy was a law student here? See if they know. But anyway, bravo on bringing up old Ted. That's one of the most popular white men ever. They make movies about him. All that stuff happened a half century ago. They talk about Ted Bundy like that happened yesterday. Go Dogs. Now, for this week, a big part of the reason the death of Jimmy Carter didn't get more attention, got eclipsed, as they say, everything that transpired on New Year's Day. Then, I mean, the apple barely dropped in New York City before it was on and popping, literally. Now, when things began in New Orleans, because that was first, and then they had the attack in Las Vegas, the initial reports, and this was, I believe, like just after 3 a.m. New Orleans Central Time. So I'm in Pacific Time here in Seattle, Washington, Ted Bundy land. It was, I guess, about 1:30, maybe 2 in the morning when I saw all of this flashing up on the news or what have you, and I'm starting to check news reports. Now, the initial reports, and I mean live, I say this all the time, the first 24 hours when they have some sort of mass casualty event, shooting, anything of that nature, wow, the news reports, you got to be really careful. That's why I've cautioned people about sharing things on the program and all that, because a lot of times they'll be wrong, and, you have to be real careful about all that. But the initial reports that I read, it was car plows through French Quarter area in New Orleans, and I think they said there were casualties and many injuries. That was the initial report. Now, they continued. I said, who did this? And they said the suspect engaged in some sort of gun battle with enforcement officers and had explosive devices. Those were in the early reports. And then they said, I saw one report, they said that the suspect had not been captured, was on the loose, as they say. Then I saw a different report that said suspect in custody. Now, all of that in conjunction, what I just said. So you got suspect has plowed in, casualties, many injuries, gun battle with police, explosive devices. There was suspect in custody, suspect on the loose. I saw both of those. No report and nothing that anybody said. I wasn't even looking for it. Identify who is this? Just, did they get the person? Do we need to be on lockdown? Do you have a suspect? Is he dead? Just that basic information. On the loose, person in custody, and some reports just said we don't even know that. All of that in conjunction with the fact that they said a car plowed through and struck a crowd of people. Now, my brain computer, I do not immediately think ISIS. I know they've had attacks in other parts of the world and what have you with that sort of thing. That's not what I think of. I immediately think of Heather Heyer. Didn't that just happen? Didn't we read case? Didn't they have Heather Heyer's name on every other page? Ooh, and run over all these people. White man, race soldier. That's what I think of immediately. I'm going to run a car through a whole bunch of people. Heather Heyer. Am I wrong? That didn't happen? Ran the car? I'm wrong? So that's number one. You can thank Isabel Wilkerson for that, because she made sure to name and mention old Heather Heyer. White woman. So I thought of that. I thought of the Tennessee attack that happened, I just mentioned, that happened on Christmas Day. We barely are past, is it 12 days from Christmas yet? Are they still doing Hanukkah and all that stuff? People still got eggnog, I bet. I just mentioned they had that Nashville bombing that happened on Christmas Day. I think that was 2020, right next to the phone facility, knocked out mobile services for about 10,000 people for all that time and everything. I just mentioned that within the past few weeks because they've been having lots of these sort of incidents. White race soldiers go out and mess up, kill some people, and bomb some infrastructure, Turner Diary style type thing. Today is January 4. 1, 2. That means Monday is January 6. Insurrection Day to some. And there was one more, if I'm permitted, one more audio tidbit. So all of this was in my brain computer when I'm reading New Orleans. This report is from Monday of this week. The attack in New Orleans happened on New Year's Day. That's Wednesday, technically, but this is Wednesday morning, so it was kind of Tuesday still and transitioning into Wednesday morning when all of this happened. But I had this report in my mind because this was from Monday of this week.
And we begin tonight with new information we have uncovered about that disturbing discovery in Isle of Wight County. I'm Jessica Larshay, and a man from our community is under investigation by the FBI. They say investigators found more than 150 homemade improvised explosive devices in Brad Spafford's possession. UC reporter John Hood explains what court records say investigators found and how the community is reacting tonight.
Neighbors and those working here off of Foursquare Road in Smithfield tell me back in December, they can remember hearing multiple booms coming from a property just down the road. But what they didn't know was, according to court documents, those booms were a part of the FBI's largest seizure of explosive devices in history.
That's a little scary. Very scary. I mean, hey, you just never know who your neighbors are, right?
Renee Wright tells me she and her crew have been working on an upcoming estate sale just down the road from where the FBI allegedly found over 150 explosives at the home of 36-year-old Brad Spafford. Wright says she can remember leaving the night on December 17th to find law enforcement vehicles flooding the road.
Really foggy that night, and when I got down around the curve, still lights, but a whole lot more when I got up there. The first house was probably, 7 or 8 cars.
A search warrant was issued against Spafford for allegedly owning a modified rifle that was unregistered. While executing the warrant, the FBI found a short-barreled rifle inside Spafford's safe and over 150 explosive devices on the property. A majority were allegedly found in a detached garage and were labeled lethal. Through an investigation, the FBI learned Spafford was allegedly stockpiling homemade ammunition and explosives even in his freezer next to food. A majority of the pipe bombs had to be detonated on site because of how unstable they were.
And it was all day long, all day long.
While Spafford is only facing one weapons violation charge for the rifle, prosecutors say he could face other charges for having unregistered destructive devices. Spafford is out on bond and is in custody of a family member. Part of his bond is also requiring him to wear an electronic monitoring system. In Smithfield, I'm John Hood, News 3.
Okie doke. Now that was from Monday. They said all day long, boom, 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 sounding like Reb and Dill. Wonder if this fella had the anarchist cookbook. I'll take the wager on that right now. Can I get a prop bet on that right now? I'm gonna put $50. That old Brad, race soldier, he had a copy of the anarchist cookbook. Can I get 50 on that? I'll put 50 on that right now. Anybody? Okay. So I had that in mind. And then we get to New Orleans. That's why I said, oh, yeah. And the initial reports that I saw, it wasn't suspect dead. It was suspect captured and or suspect on the loose. I said, ain't no way in the world. Ain't no who that. This is the home of the looter? You think Ray Nagin's cousin ran over some people in the French Quarter, ran them down, and then got into a battle with the New Orleans Police Department, and they took them into custody? Are you serious? That's why even they got away. Ain't no way in the world. And it turned out at least that part was correct, because no, non-white dude, somebody classified as black, ain't no way in the world you are going to be taken into custody after all that. No, sir, looter. So I was incorrect on that and kind of stunned because there were so many folks on social media. What? You out? Don't get snooty like white people do. Heather Hair. Sit your Heather Hair hind parts down. I should have just posted Heather Hair's name all day long. I didn't even have to do that because I didn't get time to blink before Las Vegas happened. I said, oh, well, dang, I was going to come and do a mea culpa, and I don't know what I'm talking about, ignorant nigger, and whoa. President Biden said there's no evidence that these attacks are linked. I do not have access to Secret Service, secret information. I didn't get to sneak back to Stanford this week. I don't have any evidence that these attacks are linked other than they did happen, at least temporally, time-wise, relatively close, right? These events, same day, minutes apart. That would be a big one. But what, using a vehicle, that would be 2. They said use the same app. That would be 3. So it's some connect points. Fort Bragg, I'm never saying Fort Liberty. Some white race soldier who terrorized niggers. It's going to be Fort Liberty, Fort Bragg. You should brag about it. Be proud. Stick your white chest out. Yes, I enslaved niggers and proud of it. Brag on. Brag on. But I don't have no, extra evidence that these two events are related. But I know they did say immediately, it was a white fella out in Las Vegas with a cybertruck. Elon Musk, that even stood out to me because I had never seen a cybertruck in person until I went to Stanford. I saw them there repeatedly and seeing them, and it was even kind of strange to me because I live in Seattle. I don't live in the Hicks. I don't live out in some rhubarb or some rube area of Iowa. I live in Seattle. Amazon headquarters, right here. We have quite a bit of tech. I ain't seen no Cybertrucks around. Maybe I don't hang out in the correct. Maybe I need to go to Mercer Island, go kick it. But I haven't seen any Cybertrucks in Seattle. Lots of Teslas, no Cybertrucks. First time I saw one, Stanford. Literally on the campus of Stanford. It was so intimidating because exactly what they said, it looks like a tank. Or at minimum, like some sort of police vehicle when it's time to control the nigger looters. Like, hop in my Cybertruck. Man, I was staggered. I almost was going to pull out my, and take a picture. Like, man, why did they need a Cybertruck on Stanford? Like, it's quiet. Do they have mob control here on the, anyway. That was the first time I saw one, so that was ingrained in my mind recently. And then this white fella gets the Cybertruck. Well, it is Elon Musk, Stanford alumnus. Gets his old Stanford truck, Cybertruck, and goes up and does all this in Vegas, all these explosives and what have you. Now, it took a moment. I said, I'm going to have to process. It's fascinating. This black dude, they say, reportedly, allegedly, who's carried out the New Orleans component of this, 15 casualties, other injuries, fires at police officers, and then explosive device. That's the one that really also was like, woof, this sounds like Reb and Dill, that fella in Virginia. But no, they say, black dude. And then they say he's inspired by ISIS. I heard Dr. Welsing's voice. Oh, ISIS, are you serious? Are you serious? No, man, you come out and say all that. In fact, I was so thankful. One time I have to give an acknowledgement to social media. In all the traction about all of this, and old lame, my BFF Amy Goodman didn't even mention nothing about this, and she is informed about the cases that I'm going to mention. But I looked on social media, and oh, wait a minute, I even got to get in one more. It was one more piece that made me think a white person did this. When the mayor of New Orleans, black female, she said, this event is an act of terrorism. FBI agent Althea Duncan, lovely black female, natural hair even. But FBI agent Althea Duncan came out and said it's not an act of terrorism. I said, oh, up. Now, you got all these casualties. It was 10 at the time. 10 casualties and all this. The only time that I see where an event like this happens is, whoa, you can't say this is terrorism. It's somebody classified as white. But that's since been corrected. I've heard this event consistently referred to as terrorism for the rest of the week after that, and I've even heard some people complain about Special Agent Gibson specifically and say, what was she doing saying that this was not an act of terrorism? She ought to be disgraced. We just had a listener remind us that, man, doesn't Dylan Storm Roof, isn't that an act of terrorism? They didn't charge him as such, nor did they refer to it as an act of terrorism. This one they did. But what I saw on social media was a question asked, is the U.S. military using black soldiers to commit these acts? The names they mentioned specifically: Christopher Dorner, United States Navy Reserve. And I even got a little more specific with my memory. I said, ooh, Christopher Dorner carried out his attack in California, L.A., carried out his attack in California February 2013, right after a U.S. presidential election. We talked about it in detail with Dr. Francis Cress-Welsing and highlighted the fact this dude was in the military. Did they do something to him? Micah Xavier Johnson. We talked about that event in great detail. Texas, one more time. Dallas, 2016, right in the middle of a U.S. presidential election. We even had to make a point of that with Cassandra Johnson because she wrote about that event, but she didn't mention that happened in 2016. She got the dates wrong. She brought up Philando Castile and Alton Sterling being killed and allegedly how their murders impacted her. So, but she didn't mention their names and she got the year wrong. Important because those killings, police killings of black males, were a part of why that shooting happened in Dallas, allegedly. 5 enforcement officers killed, but Micah Xavier Johnson, a couple of months before Donald Trump won the U.S. presidency. But Micah Xavier Johnson, U.S. Army Reserve, served from March 2009 to April 2015. Masonry specialist Micah Xavier Johnson. Then they already told you the alleged shooter he did shooting, the truck attack and then gun battle with enforcement officers and all the rest of it. Also, a U.S. Army veteran. I said, whoa. I would even have to step back and pause. Now, those are just facts. These folks did have these military records, the black people, black males that I just named specifically. That doesn't constitute evidence. That does not prove causality, but I at least would want to investigate it. And then, like I said, the times when these events happened, that is also fact. All of these happened during election year or right after a U.S. presidential election. That would be something I would ponder on as well. The white fella out in Vegas, also. Green Beret. Matthew Levelsberger, if I'm saying his name correctly. He also Army experience. So that would be something to ponder on as well, even if it's going in and this is the result of PTSD and their experience in the military service of white supremacy racism, and then they come back and this is what you get. Even that would be worthy of some study. But you got about, at least 3 that happened in the last decade. I would cluster those together and take a gander. Micah Xavier Johnson, Christopher Dorner, and now, if I can say it, Shamsud-Din Jabbar. I think I got it correctly. U.S. Army veteran. I would cluster those together and see if there are any other patterns, overlaps. Are there any others that we missed? Were there black vet? Uh-oh. Didn't they make a movie and brag about my brother, black brother in D.C., the sniper? Whew. I'll have to go back and process, but unless my memory is bad, I think the sniper, obviously not the child, but I think the sniper, I think also was a black male with U.S. Army experience. Now you got 4 that have happened within the last 20 years. Now I think that would break the pattern because I don't think that happened during an election year. If memory serves, that was 2002 when all that happened, so not quite an election year. One to process. What's going on there? We talked about that with Christopher Dorner. We had J.R. Valray, black male journalist in California. We talked about that, and he said, yeah, you take these black dudes and you break their brain computer and do all these experiments on them and then send them back and they're all crazy and murderous. That's on you. Even if it's at minimum you traumatized and broke their brain computer, that's on you. We didn't even get to that. Did you do something to program them and all that? But that would be 4 to check out. Any hoodles. I was wrong, though. It was not. Reports say it was a black dude. I was wrong. Not a white person in New Orleans. Let's see. Other details from the reports specifically, I'll just say, number 1, the report about exercise, when they spoke with, I think, well, I'll just give the spelling first, E-U-A-N, Yuan, I think that's it, Yuan Ashley. They said Yuan Ashley, a professor of cardiovascular medicine and genetics. I didn't even know those went together, but wow. And of course they would at what school? Professor of cardiovascular medicine and genetics at Stanford University. I forgot what black brother said. Gus, what's so special about Stanford? Just pay attention. Just pay attention. Now, how many times has Stanford been mentioned since I've been talking? What other school have I mentioned that much today or any other day? Howard, Morehouse, Morris Brown. Anyway, and I told you I was so disgruntled. I was supposed to be at the Stanford Food Summit where they were talking about food as medicine. Now, I don't even know if Yuan Ashley was going to be there because they reneged. They confirmed my participation and then they rejected. Oh, no, we got so many people that want this constructive information. You got to be a Stanford student. Get on out of here, Gus T. We know we confirmed, but we're going to renege. Sorry, we Stanford. We're going to renege. So he could have been there. I don't think so because that doesn't exactly seem like, what he's talking about with the exercise. But, I mean, you just put those two together, eat quality produce, get some exercise in, 30, 40 minutes, 4 or 5 days a week. They said even a good brisk walk, you can go uphill and get the little weights and all that. At minimum, to do that, you don't have to get a gym membership or what have you. Simple, right? Add some years, productive. And Fuller said this should not just be adding years, so you can sit around and watch Netflix a little longer. Adding years and vitality so that you can be universal man, a universal woman, replace white supremacy with justice. That's what all this is for. Race soldiers do this just so they get J. Strom Thurmond. I get 100 years of race soldiering. If you are a victim of white supremacy racism, for sure, you should have a question now. Why are you drinking all these smoothies? Why are we doing all this yoga? We could be watching TV, right? Why are we doing all this? Okay, so instead of living to be 70, we live to be 80. What is the big to-do? It should be an answer that a good answer to that question, not, well, they'll release the HD upgrade of Sanford and Son. That's not, Time with my grandchildren. Take that one too. Time to write a counter-racist book with him. Mr. Fuller wrote his book later in life. I'm going to write my counter-racism memoir. Outstanding. You take 10 years to do it. That's why I'm taking these extra time style health and vitality. Love it. But get that exercise, not being sedentary, watching TV all day long. Let's see. The alcohol. Now, we heard, I think it was 2 years back now, they said when they talk about alcohol and it is carcinogenic, they said no more than 1 sip per week. That did not come through in the report. And in fact, they were snickering and not even being serious because they said, I'm glad you didn't release this information on New Year's Day, man, because I got champagne in the car right now. Woo! All right, now go on and give it to us. What happened to dry January? They didn't even say nothing about that. They at least normally pretend for 30 days. Say, we're going to do dry January. Super Bowl is in February, right? Okay, we're going to do dry January. We're going to be tore down for the Super Bowl. I don't care who play. Michael Jordan be in the Super Bowl. We doing beer pong, tequila all day long. Woo! But we're going to do dry January until we get to Super Bowl. Man, come on. And like I said, they had the information. This wasn't rumor. This wasn't, something I heard in the streets. They had studies that said more than 1 beer shot glass of wine per week. Up, you're heading to the cancer zone. Just 1. That's moderation. They didn't even, mention it. We can have a little bit, just a teaspoon. No, man. No. What does that fool say? Sobriety would be best. They didn't say that at all. I told you, Gus T got the pithy. Quick, you don't have to waste a whole lot of. Sobriety would be best. Come on, man. Come on. And ring in the new year that way, man. They got apple cider. They got all kinds of goodies and concoctions. You can carbonate and put some O2 in there, CO2 in there, and make it carbonated. Like, come on. It's 20. We are almost 2040. I almost said it's almost 2025. No, man, it's almost 2040. That's the one I use from now on. It's almost 2040. That is embarrassing. Let's see. The decline in murders, I'll just say quickly. In a system of white supremacy racism, white people have got to have killing all the time. That is a massive component of the crime, lurking, suspicion, fear of white genetic annihilation is a massive part of the I gotta have my gun, all of that. We know we got to do criminalize, kill, put in jail, all kinds of black people. We got to do all kinds of lying about that. We got prisons to fill. We got white welfare, prison jobs and all that so we can kill the Robert Brooks of the world and lynchings, all of that. All of that. They know that lying about crime is a massive part of that. We're supposed to have prisons. We're supposed to have nigger knockers, Norm Stamper, all of that. Also, we had C.O.W.S as a guest on the white program some years back, white woman. She said, contrary to popular opinion, white people are not ignorant. They know what they have done with regards to practicing white supremacy racism, and they know they deserve their comeuppance. That's how she phrased it, C.O.W.S. I think that a lot of white people know that that's true. They know, man, these non-white people should grab me and tear my hind parts up. Facts. Facts. Male, female, doesn't matter age, whatever, like, ooh, we. Just based on the record and facts. All of it. I think lots of white people know that. And white people kill for fun. There's so much underlying all of that, all of it connected to the great equalizer and the crime. That's why the necessity to lie. You're under attack. They're coming to take your goodies. Remember, we talked to the folks in South Africa. They said, they're coming to take our water. Water. Okay. Let's see. We had our guest on the program some years back. I have to go look to get his name. This is a black male guest. It was like 10 years ago. But he did a study, and it was young white dudes saying that they were fearful and they had to have a firearm and a gun. They were fearful that there was going to be some sort of criminal assault against them or what have you, and they had to get in. They had formed clubs to go out and shoot and all this with their guns. And I said, well, dang, have any of them been a victim? Have they? Nope, not a one. But in my imagination, Leroy is out to get me, and I'm going to be prepared. Great equalizer. Let's see. The Capitol riot, I can't say enough. January 6th was also a major motivating factor in my thinking that a white person did this in New Orleans, because this happened on January 1, 5 days away from January 6th, where they're still trying to figure out who dropped all these pipe bombs. I remember we talked about that at the beginning of last year when we were reading Standing My Ground, Mr. Dunn's book. Capitol Police, former Capitol Police officer, privileged black male, but they still haven't even tracked down who did all the pipe bombs. I think a white person did that too, and in fact, probably someone with some military connections, if I want to be honest about it. Maybe they got explosives training. Be stealth, sneak in, undetected. 5 years and you still can't find me. 4 years, sorry. And the momfluencers. I had to sneak that one in on a week. I didn't even play anything related to President Carter and even how he practiced white supremacy racism, although I did share on social media a great article that I found while doing my Jim Jones digging, even before I went to California, where Jimmy Carter, he had been saying that Atlanta was so progressive and had done so well economically, and they got that big airport and yum, 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 and all this. Julian Bond, the late, great Cowbell, and others came out and said he was able to do this because lots of people don't know the details about Atlanta, and all of this is a lie, and black people have been left behind, and all of the economic progress of Atlanta and the blight. It's a really detailed article, but it starts off with a great quote by Julian Bond, and he said it so plain, keep it simple. Jimmy Carter lied, talking about all this economic progress, and black people in Atlanta are suffering, and I love it so much because this is like, I get, if you take the official record, this is like 1 year before the beginning of the so-called Atlanta child murders, which really highlighted now how much progress have black people made in Atlanta. Any hoodles. And some of that was on Jimmy Carter's watch too, because it started in 79. Yikes. I guess the first half of that. Yeah, because he didn't leave until 81. First half of that. Matter of fact, that would be what to talk about. Atlanta child murders. He was there for the first half of that. What you got to say about that, Jimmy Carter? And that was the International Year of the Child, 1979, Jimmy Carter. Anyway, I didn't play anything about all that, but I did play the momfluencer. They had the audacity on NPR to say that, wow, I'm on watching social media, and they're talking about making a souffle or bone marrow soup and decorating, and then all of a sudden they slip in, these no-count immigrants. Whoa, how did I? Every iteration of white ignorance you can imagine. I watch YouTube videos, social media content on recipes, cooking, vegan experience, all of that. Love it. At no point would I be so engulfed. Oh my goodness. Look what they are doing with that pesto. Wow. Do you see those yams? Oh, and the onions caramelized. For them to come in and slip and, by the way, the coon. Or any iteration of it. Anything that I thought was white supremacy racism. There is no way. Dang. How did I? What is going? I don't. Come on. White people are not ignorant. They are not stupid. And even if I did, I'm watching and looking for a lasagna tip, and then all of a sudden they done dipped into, is that a swastika? Whoa. Flag. Now this is something else. Now we got to put the spatula down and get into counter-racism studies. I might finish watching and sharing, but I mean, no, this is not no, how did I end up? And they tricked me again. Those sly, clever, get out of here, man. Incidentally, That is, I have seen where race soldiers, oh yeah, white women, you can't have a system without racist woman, racist man. Oh yeah, make sure you get on there with our content so they can see the pretty face, so people do not just think race soldier and Klan, like, oh yeah, that's my role. I can be here and the homestead and all the rest. They also, in that same report, NPR, they had the conflation where they worked in the LGBT, and they'll bash and talk about they're doing all of the LGBT abuse in the schools and such. That is not the same thing as white supremacy racism, and they know this. In fact, you have a number of individuals who are LGBTQ and all the rest of it, and they still practice white supremacy racism, and white people already know this. White people in Seattle definitely know this. Let's see. Anything else? That'll be it for now. Number again, 605-313-5164. The code 564-943#. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. Let's see. Victim in New Jersey should be with us. If you're on a job situation, make sure you're not chatting about the neither really, Vegas or New Orleans. No chatting about politics on the job. Black people or white people, non-white people or white people, no talking politics on the job. I've never heard anyone get a raise about talking about the latest mass shooting at their workplace. Folks who dialed in with a hand up, proceed.
Yeah, Gus, Victim from New Jersey. I definitely don't talk about politics on the job. Unfortunately, like it's a big, it's over 100 drivers, not even counting office, warehouse employees. Honestly, Gus, I don't know half of the people on my job. So I just, and that's a blessing. So I just get my paperwork and I leave. I am cordial with some of the customers, and politics has came up, and I guess Victim from New Jersey can be classified as a coon because I just sit there, I just nod and grin. Okay, wow, really? Okay. And, without giving my opinion, and I sign the paper and keep going. So that's about it. Speaking of Jimmy Carter, white male, Chris Hedges wrote an article and has also did some audio video about Jimmy Carter, but his writings about Jimmy Carter is titled "Don't Deify Jimmy Carter." And it says Jimmy Carter may have done good works out of office, but in power, he fomented a series of domestic and foreign policy disasters. So that piece is from Chris Hedges. I also seen the black female who FBI agent that said that at first the reports that it wasn't a terrorist act. White people went on to ridicule her, calling her a DEI hire, and so she took a lot of insults from that initial reporting that she said that it wasn't a terrorist act. I wonder if it was a white male who did this and she went on to say that it wasn't a terrorist act. I wonder if she would have suffered the same ridicule and insults. I've been to New Orleans. I've been to Bourbon Street. And I must say, Gus, that place has always frightened me. I've only been there one time. Well, I can't say always. But when I went there, that place seemed to be unsafe. unsafe. I repeat, unsafe. It's a small street. It smells horrible. When I did walk up and down the street, I was concerned about my safety because I seen minimum law enforcement. I may have seen maybe a law enforcement officer on Bourbon Street, and he was on horseback. And only thing I thought to myself was, I said, if I was assaulted, or let's just say, beat up, stabbed, first thing that I thought was, how are paramedics going to be able to get to me? And because of this phobia of that particular street, for the remainder of my stay in New Orleans, a lot of my friends, attempted mate at the time, girlfriend, not married, they was upset with me because I didn't want to venture back on Bourbon Street. The smell, I thought that it was unsafe, and I thought it was just too many people, minimum law enforcement, on that particular street. Gus, the C.O.W.S, has made me real slow to report on news. I wait a few days. I gather information, so I just, with the terrorist attack, with the classified terrorist attack and the cybertruck attack and the white male being caught with all these explosives, I just paused and just collected information. I am a victim of racism, white supremacy. At times, I show offism. We do sometimes want to be quick to report something. So because of the C.O.W.S, I just took a pause and just waited to see what happened. When I did find out that this was a black male, and then the cybertruck attack, maybe is a mistake, but I just couldn't help to think about Jim Jones. I'm forever, anything I see, I am infected with the legacy of Jim Jones and the CIA. So I'm always thinking, is this a CIA psyop? So that could be incorrect, but, blame it on the book read. That's a lot of times that's what goes right into my brain computer. What am I seeing? Is this a CIA psyop? Knowing that these two individuals was connected to the military, I go right there, right away. Earlier, the book reads, this has nothing to do with the Compensatory Call-In, but I think, Gus, you mentioned Thea Gibson, tennis player, doing the new book read. I just want to say that Thea Gibson was my next door neighbor in East Orange, New Jersey. So I knew her as a boy. So I must say, Thea Gibson wasn't balling out of control like the Serenas and Venus Williams. So she lived a very comfortable, modest life. She even attempted, as an elder, to teach me and my cousin how to dribble a basketball. So she was my next door neighbor in East Orange, New Jersey. And I didn't even know who she was until one day my mother bought me encyclopedias, Encyclopedia Britannica, if not mistaken. And I used to just look through the encyclopedia. A lot of times I wasn't even reading. I was young. I was a boy. I was just sometimes just look at the pictures, and I'm scrolling through the encyclopedia, and I'm like, wow, this was my next door neighbor, Thea Gibson. She was in the encyclopedia. So that's just something I wanted to share with the cows. Very, very nice lady, very dignified, stayed to herself. I didn't see many visitors in and out of her home, but if I'm not mistaken, she might have stayed in these storms until she died. And I'll close.
Wow, that is amazing. Althea Gibson taught him how to dribble. Stunning. I did mention in the book club, because Maya Angelou mentions in the introduction of the text we're reading, The Heart of a Woman, that Althea Gibson was welcomed by the world. And I mean, she accomplished an extraordinary amount in tennis and golf. It says in her one of the biographies about her, she talks about playing basketball growing up and being pretty good at it. I think they have pictures of her on a female basketball team. I forgot the name, but it was something like the Mystery Ballers or something like that. But they were really, really good. Like, they beat male teams, and apparently she was just super talented at lots of things, tennis, golf, basketball. Like, wow. But yes, I did not have any impression at all that she was balling from the financial aspect, like wearing mink fur tennis outfits every day and, diamond-studded tennis racket. No, I did not. Which was exactly my point. I did not think she had it like that at all. But be that as it may, that is amazing. I guess learn who your neighbors are. You never know. Althea Gibson, the great. And you were not the only person who thought something strange could have been happening. Was this a planned activity, government involvement, CIA activity, a la Jonestown? Because of the military background of all of the people who are reportedly involved, the suspects of the New Orleans and Las Vegas attack, respectively. A number of other folks had the same questions, like, what is this exactly? Yeah, and I thought the same thing, because it might be that Alethea Duncan, that's the FBI special agent, black female. Yeah, I said it correctly. Alethea Duncan, black female, special agent, FBI, who originally said that this is not a terrorist attack. She may have been misinformed or whatever, like myself, that, oh, this is a white person. That's the code. This is not terrorism. This is not terrorism. We do not say that old Timothy McVeigh is a terrorist. And then they found out, oh, wait a minute, a black dude. Oh, wait a minute, whoop. Like, it might have been that sort of thing, too. And exact same. So if this had been a white person, like in Las Vegas, who did this, and she had made that same statement, this is not enacted, would it have been the same response? What do you mean? This is an act of terror. Jesus. I don't know. Any hoodles. Much obliged. I did want to make sure I get in just the same vein. The DC sniper, John Allen Muhammad, he did have his black child with him. He was under 18, so I'm not even going to name him, even though they did prosecute him, of course. But he wasn't even 18. John Allen Muhammad, and he got an honorable discharge from the Army. And they talk about his tours of service and all that. In fact, Christopher Dorner and John Allen Muhammad, most of the photos, the most prominent photos that I have in my brain computer, that like stock photos when they show them, it's when they're in their military uniform. They got, most of the time when I see Christopher Dorner and John Allen Muhammad, they're wearing fatigues. Just saying. Other folks who dialed in with a hand up, you have commentary, proceed.
May I be heard?
Lauren, yes, ma'am.
Evening, everyone. The NPR segment where they were talking about those momfluencers pushing hate messages, I think that's what they said. And they were talking about, they have a beautiful family. Oh, this is pretty. And wait, what did she say about immigrants? And I also noticed that they said white and nationalist utopian vision for society. And the term gender blind spot, I hadn't heard that one before. I was, does that mean that these people don't think of white women as racist, white supremacists? Gender blind spot. It's pretty interesting. The two males who did the apparent attacks on New Year's Day, it seemed like they talked about them differently. The 37-year-old white man in Vegas, when I looked on the internet, it called him Master Sergeant Matthew Leibelsberger. I still don't know. I've looked at a couple of different articles or whatnot about the non-white male, Shamsud-Din Jabbar, and I still don't know what his rank was. It didn't say. I mean, even if it was a private, he could have said that, and I doubt it was a private since he was in the service for so long. I think they said like 10 years. It just said that he served in the U.S. Army. Also, when they were talking about the white man, they said the FBI is still searching for a motive, and it wasn't because of a particular ideology, but the non-white male, they said he was radicalized, and it said something about extremists or something like that. And I just, when are white people ever radicalized? Like, how racist do you have to be? How many people, what does a white person have to do to be radicalized? I don't know. I hardly ever hear that. The white man who was being interviewed when they were talking about these two males that, committed these attacks on New Year's Day, he said some people, instead of self-destruction, will move to the destruction of others. And also, they were talking about Trump. And he said people who are from outside of this country are more of a threat. White people are from outside of this so-called country. And I think white people are the biggest threat. But, when he said that outside of this country means non-white, they have their code, just like immigrant is code for non-white. They don't say that, but all the white people know exactly what you mean. They were talking about deporting pro-Hamas terrorists, and pro-Hamas means pro-Palestine, and the people in Palestine are non-white. It's just they're able to say all of these things usually without specifying white, non-white. I read some interesting news articles over the past week. I read one. I think it was in the Guardian. It was called "As a Child Psychiatrist, I See What Smartphones Are Doing to Kids' Mental Health, and It's Terrifying." It was a pretty interesting article, and I have some excerpts. But this lady said the majority of children over 10 I see at my NHS clinic now have smartphones, and we're seeing profound mental illness stemming from excessive social media use, online bullying, screen addiction, or falling prey to online child sexual exploitation. Seeing children who are disappearing into online worlds, who are unable to sleep, who are increasingly inattentive and impulsive, emotionally dysregulated, and aggressive. And it made me think about Bay Area Mom, the way she describes the children's behavior sometimes. She said children and adolescents are increasingly seeking comfort and validation from peer groups online. And, she just talked about the dangerous activity going on, like suicide pacts and things like that. I was like, dang. Also, another article, this was in the New York Times. The title is "The EPA Promotes Toxic Fertilizer. 3M Told It of Risk Years Ago." And this was by Hiroko Tabuchi. But anyway, basically in early 2000s, scientists at 3M, the chemical giant, they make a discovery. There's high level of PFAS, the virtually indestructible forever chemicals used in nonstick pans and stain-resistant carpets and many other products. These PFAS were turning up in the nation's sewage. The company's research had already linked PFAS exposure to birth defects, cancer, and more. That sewage was being used as fertilizer on farmland nationwide, and the EPA was encouraging this behavior. So 3M didn't publish the research. They had it for like 3 years. Then they shared it with the EPA in 2003. But today, this is more than 20 years later, the EPA continues to promote sewage sludge as a fertilizer and doesn't require testing for the PFAS. They basically said like that this stuff is covering like at least 20% of U.S. farmland. And once they put the sludge on the farmland, it becomes essentially permanently contaminated. Only one state, Maine, has started to systematically test for the PFAS, and I don't know. So that's terrible, and that's like 1/5 of the farmland at a minimum, and it's affecting fruits, vegetables, meat, milk. I'm not sure about eggs. It made me think, what was his name? Dr. Nayana Rasayan, who called white people cesspoolians. That's what it made me think of. Last week, I talked about non-white people having a problem generating electricity. Same thing is happening in the area of the world called Ecuador. There's an article about that in New York Times as well. And there was also a super interesting article about, it says, here's a New Year's resolution for Trump's America, no snitching. This was by Hamilton Nolan in The Guardian, January 3rd. He said, fascism needs snitches everywhere in order to work. By vowing not to snitch, you can therefore strike a blow for justice without doing anything at all. The country's problems are caused by people most likely to be snitched to, not snitched on. The boss, not the worker. The cop, not the vagrant. And I thought it was pretty interesting. The terms white and non-white were not used in the article, but a person can use their brain computer and figure out who's who. And, I thought of Mr. Fuller, the 10 stops, stop snitching is in there. And that's all I have for right now. Thank you for allowing me to speak.
I think Mr. Fuller is pretty explicit in how he defines stop snitching, like sharing information for personal gain. Like, is that what they mean when they say, like, stop snitching?
Well, they use the term fascism. They did not use the term racism. But, I don't expect them to write an article sounding like Mr. Fuller.
I don't know. I think that might be, that's how you could take the same term, same phrasing, stop snitching. And they can have totally different, because I've heard Mr. Fuller where he said, like with Christopher Dorner, we talked about that. Literally, we talked about that. That is not snitching to report, hey, this Dorner fella is out here killing, because he started killing non-white people too. Incorrect all the way. But that is not snitching to report that you're just reporting incorrect activity, which should be done to establish justice. That's what I said with that report. That sounds like, they say fascism, like whatever that means, because lots of people have different definitions for that too, but almost sounds like, man, we're trying to be an era of concealment. That's how we preserve white supremacy racism. That's how that system is maintained, through deception and concealing information. Like, yeah, we don't want people reporting, especially reporting incorrect behavior. Like, oh, shh, keep quiet.
That's not how the article read at all. I didn't read the whole thing because I didn't want to take a lot of time. But I gave the name so anyone can look up the article and see what they think about that. It's called Here's a New Year's Resolution for Trump's America, No Snitching. It's The Guardian, January 3rd, 2025.
Oh, okay. We'll check it out. Well, I'll take her word for it. She says that's not what it means. I'm always a little, when they talk about snitching, period, because either they'll be saying that we, people classified as black, see, that's the problem. You black people, you all got your no snitching code and don't see, they'll be doing that, which is some nonsense. And then I've heard them on the other one, too, because they'll be fussing at people like Julian Assange, who I think is white, race soldier. But he's with, like, WikiLeaks. They'll say that he is snitching. See? I have to see. Is he mentioned in the article? Do you remember? We can read it ourselves. But is Julian Assange, does he come up there? Yay, nay?
He was not mentioned, sir.
Oh, wow. How about that? How about that? Anywho, maybe they say he's too old. That's old hat. Any hoodles. But they'll say someone like him is, not everybody, but they'll say he's snitching. You need to get rid of him or, do something about it. Not all white people are happy about Mr. Assange. Any hoodles. We'll check it out at the Guardian. Fascism. That's one, too. Fascism. I wonder if they explain. I'll read the article. See if they give us a definition for fascism. Much obliged. Lauren. Number again, 605-313-5164. The code 564943 pound. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. She said white people do not get described as radical. White people get described as emboldened. I would much rather be called emboldened than because they call me radical and militant all the time. How do you get to be radical and a coon? Like, it should be, if you ever get called like militant, you should be permanently removed from the coon list. Can't be both. That happens often. But white people, they are not radical. They are emboldened. Emboldened. Let's see. I had not heard that term gender blind spot either, talking about the mom influencers. That one, I also thought it sounded like they were saying we don't typically see white people as racist. If that's what she meant, we'll have to see. I don't know if that's what she meant, but that's what it sounded like, that we don't see white women, we don't see white women specifically as racist, which I contend for years, the whole 16 years, that's a major problem. Widespread. It's the man. No, the woman and the man. Got to have both. Let's see. Other folks who have commentary to share. Let's see. If we missed you totally and have a hand up, proceed.
Hello.
Our caller down in Jimmy Carter land. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, thanks so much for taking my call. I hope everyone's having the best evening they can have. A lot of great clips. I guess a couple of things. The Las Vegas shooting, I've kind of heard of it, but it's, I guess, well, not weird, but I watched too much YouTube, and I did see stories about New Orleans, but I didn't see anything about that man come up, the Vegas person. I didn't see him at all. Nothing. I think I kind of saw it, maybe a commentator on the side, but I didn't hear anything about the Vegas person. And concerning that one looks darker than the other, I guess I'm not surprised. I mean, I don't look for things like that in my feed, so I usually look up hair stuff, so I don't. So I thought that was, of course, unusual. The exercise information is always good. It's always good to reinforce the benefit of exercising and eating right. The previous call, I did look at the article. It seems like, because it didn't look that long, but to summarize, seems like they want you to protect immigrants. So if someone's an immigrant, no, you don't know, you didn't see anything, you don't know, you don't understand. Nothing about helping black people that are already here. And And then they do put in the article about the snitching, how no snitching was popular among rappers and gang members. And now they're saying, oh, no, that's not the attitude to have. So don't snitch. That's kind of the summary, because things are going to be awful because Donald Trump is coming in office, and I don't know who is, I don't know about things being great for black people, so I don't know how much worse it can get. So I guess I'm supposed to protect immigrants. I can't say I don't know if I'm gonna be able to do that. I'm not gonna purposely, I guess, telling people. If someone asks me, you need to learn to speak properly, so I won't get picked. If someone asks me, officer, they went that way, I'm not going down for aiding and abetting anybody either. I'm a professional person with a license. I think I said that more than once. I'm not losing my license. I worked hard over 20 years. You've got to be kidding me. That's a no. The thing about New Orleans, I did bring it up at work, not necessarily for political reasons, but my boss, he has Louisiana roots. So I was just like, is your family okay? I like my job, so is your family okay? And he went on to say what he heard, blah, 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 this and other. Then we went on and had our meeting. But, that's the only way I brought it up. Is your family okay? And because we work with people from around the country, so if something does happen, like even in Buffalo or whatever, the incident with the young man, the murder of the young man in Memphis by the 5 officers. I have a coworker whose sons knew some of the officers, and we didn't talk about them, of course, openly. She's black, so we kind of talked about them on the side, in that little side room. But no, you're right. Just for the most part, don't talk about politics or things like that. I know there'll be some conversations with the new administration coming in. That's why I'm glad I'm not on the phone talking to live customers, because they will start talking to you about those things. And I'm thinking, I just want to keep my job, ma'am. I just want to keep my job, sir. I want to keep my job, whatever you call yourself at the time. I just need my job. I don't care who's in office. All I know is inauguration day is time and a half day, and I will be at work getting my time and a half. And that is as political as I'm going to get about that. And that is all for now. I don't have any big things about work. If something happens, of course, I'll share on a Friday program. Thank you.
Inauguration day, time and a half. I love it. That's my favorite day. Inauguration day. Woo. Ching, ching. Much obliged. Black female caller in Georgia. She went and read the other. Hey, reading more important than watching television. Articles, newspaper, that counts. She said they got the rappers and the no snitch. No. Lil Weezy, Drake, if so-called black people, rappers, if they got any sort of no snitch culture, we got that from the original gangsters, racist woman, racist man. Who lynched that black boy? That's no snitch. Matter of fact, you come back 50 years later, who lynched that black boy? That's no snitch. Any hoodles. No politics in the workplace. She said, hey, I like keeping my job. Is your family okay? Oh, my goodness, it's terrible. All right, back to business. And away we go. And even with that, hey, question Lane. She didn't get up and speechify and all this. Is your family okay? Oh, okay. Well, God bless you. I'm going to pray for you. Let's get back to the meeting. Ching. Love it. That might get a raise for that too. Love it, love it, love it. Other than that, no politics in the workplace. Nothing to say. Nothing to say. She said she hadn't heard anything about the white fella in Vegas, Green Beret. Now, he didn't kill anybody. Fella in non-white male suspect allegedly killed 15 people. So that is, quite a difference. 15 casualties, 0 casualties. She said she hadn't heard about it at all. Hey, the president had to come out and answer questions. Are these two events related? She hadn't heard about it at all? Dang. And then Lauren, she said that when she hears about it, it's Master Sergeant Matthew Livesberger. I think that's it, Livesberger, however you say it. But it's Master Sergeant. Like, wow, Green Beret. Non-white male in Louisiana, they don't do all that. You don't get, what was his rank and all that? It's nigger male. Yeah. I guess that's a rank. Nigger male. That is a rank, so. Let's see. Other folks who dialed in with a hand up. If you have commentary, proceed.
Greetings, everyone. Can I be heard?
Retired firefighter in Florida.
Yes, I was just thinking as you were making your commentary on the how a lot of these incidents, they are former people in the military, and my thoughts were that the military gets these people, these young people, in some cases as early as 17 years old, and in a short period of time, train a lot of them to be killers. But as they are ending their career, there is no period of time to whereas there's some sort of treatment to reverse that process. So in my thoughts, it is to be expected that that issue of killing that a lot of these people have is going to continue. As far as my reports for today, for a long time, I decided to basically not recognize the 31st of December / 1st of January in the way that it is commonly practiced, and the different slogans such as New Year's Day, Happy New Year's, that sort of thing, because of what takes place on those days, and a lot of it's not constructive, just like any other day of the week. And if there is such thing as a new year or new day, it should be the aspiring is to solve problems, which a lot of people are not interested in, apparently. James Carter, former president, what is in my memory of him, I think I was in grad school at the time at Grambling State University, but I was home. I was at home from I'm trying to say some sort of break where I was home, and that was during a time where the 80 riots had already taken place. And as president, I guess it was his decision to come down here to give some kind of acknowledgement of the rebellion / riot. And in turn, the response he got to it, because he was in the direct areas where a lot of the activity was taking place. And as he was leaving, first of all, it wasn't very friendly from the residents. And as he was leaving, he was stoned. And the reason why I said he was stoned because it was more than one rock that was being thrown at him. And people down here, especially black males, are quite accurate with things in their hands, throwing it. And one of them happened to hit the presidential limousine that he was in as it was leaving. That was a memory that I had of that. When I went back up to grad school after that break, I was teased for about a couple of weeks on the behavior of black people in Liberty City on that issue. I do remember that as far as my memory of. One thing that I just heard recently about Mr. Carter that I was hearing as commentary from other non-white black people was that Mr. Carter had a big heart, and I'm not real sure on what that actually means when a person has a big heart. Other than I do know having a big heart medically is a negative medical condition. Other than that, they probably wasn't talking about that, but other than that, I don't know what that means by someone having a big heart. Last but not least, this goes into the records as another example of when you are confronted by law enforcement, have a code. The first thing on that list should be to survive the encounter. I'm speaking about Mr. Fred Curley, who was down here, actually, from my understanding, was on Miami Beach. And I saw the video. He did not look happy as he was approaching, closing the distance with multiple law enforcement officers. In turn, the not uncommon reaction was he was jumped on and assaulted. I'm not sure on what was the cause of the meeting of the two parties, other than the report that I read was saying something about that he was coming to mention about his vehicle, or something like that. I don't know, but anyway, it's something that it gives another understanding that on how one has to be on code as far as or develop a code based on safety and your own personal survival when you come in contact with law enforcement. And that's my week report. Thanks for listening.
Much obliged. You see how all black people become culpable. Say, you and your cousins, which y'all did to our good white president, ought to be ashamed of yourself. I didn't have it. Yes, you did. Yes, you did. It was you and your cousins throwing rocks at the president. Ought to be shamed. Dang. They probably got newspaper articles of all of that in the paper. Incidentally, the commentary about the so-called good heart will nab Octavius in New York. The big heart, rather, of Jimmy Hart. It reminded me, they had newspaper articles talking about this. I saw them over the past week. How Jimmy Carter made a wrongly convicted killer his daughter's White House nanny. And they got a big picture of a little white girl, presumably that is Jimmy Carter's daughter, white, blonde, and then black female. During his presidency, Jimmy Carter held one unique title in particular, parole officer for Mary Prince, a woman convicted of murder who found strong allies in the recently deceased former president and former First Lady Rosalind Carter after she became their daughter Amy Carter's nanny. Prince, then known by her married name, Mary Fitzpatrick, was convicted of murder in 1970 but maintained her innocence. Both the former president and First Lady became advocates for her cause and brought her to work in both the Georgia governor's mansion and the White House. In his 2005 memoir, Sharing Good Times, Carter called Prince an integral member of our family and called her a binding force, whatever that means, keeping the Carter family tied together as the couple's children grew older. Prince grew up in the small town of Richland, Georgia. She dropped out of school in the 7th grade in order to take care of her younger sister, according to a profile of her published in People magazine shortly after Carter's inauguration in 1977. In 1970, Prince went to a bar in Lumpkin County, Georgia, with her cousin, who was carrying a gun when her cousin got into an argument with another woman. Imagine that at a bar. Huh. Prince tried to intervene. I didn't know anything about guns, but I tried to take it away and it went off. We didn't know he had hit anyone, Prince told People in 1977. However, the other woman accused Prince of deliberately shooting and killing the woman's boyfriend. A court-appointed attorney spoke to Prince only twice for about 10 to 15 minutes. She said he advised her to plead guilty, promising a light sentence. Carter wrote in his 2005 book, Our Endangered Values. She was young, black, and penniless. You could probably stop with young and black, but then being penniless. So she did as told and got a life sentence in return. Rosalind wrote in her own memoir, First Lady from Plains. However, Prince soon was able to secure a job at the Georgia governor's mansion as trustee, where she quickly found herself working as a nanny for Carter's eldest daughter. Amy and I, we hit it off on our first date, Prince told journalist Kate Anderson Brower in her 2015 book, The Residence Inside the Private World of the White House. Our daughter was 3 years old at the time, and Mary's intelligence and dedication convinced us to let her help Rosalind care for Amy while I was governor, Carter himself wrote in Sharing Good Times. But after Carter's term as governor ended, Prince was forced to return to prison. She told People that Amy cried when saying goodbye, and Rosalind came to visit her at Fulton County Jail. They have a picture of the Carter family. I was looking, since they said that Miss Prince was part of the family, to see if she's there, but she's not in the family photo. Oh well. Anyway, I didn't know about any of this until a couple days ago. But yes, they published all. I guess that's the best you can hope for if you are a convicted black murdering Negro in Georgia during this time period. That's about the best you can hope for, is being a nanny on a plantation for white people, all the way to the White House plantation. That's about the best you can hope for, right? That's a big heart. There you go. Now take that, old no-count, militant, rascal, tired fireman. I don't know what big. That's big heart. Now, don't know what a big heart is. Octavius in New York. Yes, sir.
Greetings, Gus. Greetings, callers and listeners. The Jimmy Carter thing, I have to admit, I have to do more research. I don't know that much about Jimmy Carter as far as historic lines. I've just recently started doing some more digging on him. But I'll check it out later on as far as it goes. First off, that segment about drinking, I think is really, really poignant, but I think the point that you mentioned earlier is also very important, which is right after you do a dry January, you go straight into February, and it's not just the football, that's involved there, the Super Bowl. It's not just that people are going to binge drink and go crazy. It's also other sports like basketball, where the NBA will have I think they're going to have the again? They're going to have the All-Star game, and that's also in February. So that's another time people are going to be drinking as well. So it's backed up 2 times there. And I think that's the part that I think people have to, if they really do a dry January, I think you should just continue on and go into February, try to go into March, try to minimize it and go as far as you can, because I shared that article, that segment, with a few of my friends in a chat, and the pushback I got was, well, why not? Why don't we talk about how poison the food is? And I said, we could do that too. We could have that conversation, and we could talk about the alcohol. We could talk about how both are poison. So that's not really up for debate, but there's pushback with people stopping alcohol consumption. It's pretty tough. The crime decline segment, I think, is really a good one to mention, because ultimately you're dealing with a group of people in the society, that white people, that want to continually keep the image of violence and just confusion constantly, spreading. And as it does spread and more white people get caught up in that crime perspective, of course, they're going to turn to the black community out of all the communities to point the finger where the crime is coming from and who should get arrested and locked up the most, which leads to the other segment about prison. And that was a pretty tough segment to listen to. I have personal experience with this, not being in prison, but being falsely accused of a crime I didn't commit and having to go through the process. And I don't think people understand that the people that are able to beat these cases, and I've had other friends that dealt with this as well, might I add, when you beat the case, you can sue the city, but don't think you're going to get these $2 million or $4 million paybacks like you're going to get some kind of retribution. That's not the case often for most people that sue the city for being falsely arrested and locked up. And I'm saying that from personal experience. And the difficult part that people don't account for is that when you do get arrested, say you are a parent and you're financing your household, your job that you're working at, your plantation is not going to ask you, oh, gee, what happened? They really don't care. So you're going to lose the job. And then if you have an apartment that you're paying for, you're going to lose the apartment because you can't afford the rent, because you lost your job because you were falsely arrested. Like, it's a continuous spiral downward after that. There's no system there to help people get out of that situation. And again, I've seen this not with just myself, but I've seen it with other people. So it's a really sad story when it comes to that. That does hit differently when I listen to it. The segment also about white women having these podcasts and these shows that are sharing all this wholesome information about cooking and maintaining your household, but basically are just masquerading as racist white women. I see it as I see it way more dangerous, I think, than other people would. And the reason being is just that I think we constantly keep having this kind of image of purity when it comes to white women. And because they're quote unquote so-called gendered, we leave them out of that spectrum of being racist. And in all reality, they're some of the worst, if not the worst. And I think what they're doing now by putting these images and ideologies in the airwaves, they're causing a lot more confusion. And then also with our community, but also they're breeding the same type of stereotypes over and over again. And I think I can't recall if it was Dr. T.S. Johnson you spoke to, who spoke about this, Daughters of the Confederation, and they were some of the first original female Klans members, and how intricate they were in the process of racism. And they were the ones that were spreading a lot of misinformation to people about why the Civil War was even fought. I think it was Daughters of the Confederacy. There's an article in regards to it. I'll share that when I get the opportunity. But I do think that's a very important thing for us to keep an eye on as racism continues to breed and consistently grow in this system, that they will be the forerunners. They will be in the front. And for instance, Marjorie Taylor, I believe she's a congresswoman, and she's a part of QAnon. She's a part of that right-wing conspiracy racist group, which also you had a segment about. So that being said, those are some key notes I think I wanted to drop in. The last thing I'd say is I went to the Museum of Natural History, and I've been there plenty of times. It's not a place where you can go once and see one thing. But this time I went, they had a segment called Iced Out. And this exhibition, it was rappers or hip hop artists, I should say, and their jewelry. I had real mixed feelings about it going in there, because there were some artists that I listened to that I kind of respected. There were other ones, and I just think the image of just us glamorizing over jewelry and shiny objects and not connected to how it actually kind of pushes us back in some areas. I don't know. It was a difficult exhibition to see. I did appreciate seeing it because they did have, again, some artists like Public Enemy, and you could take Public Enemy's work. It takes a nation of millions to hold us back, and how they related some of their work to Dr. Frances Cress Welsing, and they gave her the credit, and that actually helped me explore racism, white supremacy more. So I do tip my hat to them in that regard. Again, there were other artists in there that you could kind of say, hey, VGQ, that's what they do to earn their coins. But again, it was still an experience, and it was something I'll definitely have to toggle with and maybe write about at a later date time. Thank you for your time, and I will mute my line.
Oh, sound like you ambivalent about your black culture. I mean, bling bling, that's black culture. That's what I've been told. Like, I don't, matter of fact, they could have got double dip of black culture if they had said hip hop artists have the big gold chain, diamond encrusted, and then have the big gold plate on it say no snitching, no G on it, no snitching. Any hoodles, that was not what I was expecting at the museum. I think he said natural science. That's not what I was expecting. Like when he said iced out, I was like, oh man, they're gonna have like Ice Age, like something like that. And we're gonna go back and thousands of years ago. No. Dang, that's not, I was not expecting that at all. Wow. Wow. Black culture. I don't know what to say. Black culture.
Hey guys, can I say this? In part of the interruption, that's what I was saying to you. It was really, again, it was difficult to just go through this because, again, they're just perpetuating the same stereotypes, and there's no context at all. It's just big jewelry and just a couple of bars, maybe like 3 or 4 lines about the artist, and that's it. Like, there's no real historic context as to why it became popular, why it's an issue, nothing at all. So it just contributed to way more confusion. And I like I said, I found it problematic, even though they had some groups, like I said, Public Enemy in there, which I did learn, again, quite a bit from in the process of still learning.
Right
on. Meanwhile.
Much obliged. Much obliged. Yeah, that's context is important, and wow, that's just not what I might have even had to. They have curators, generally white. I might have even had to ask, like, what? How long is this exhibit supposed to be here? Who created this exhibit? What's the purpose of having this exhibit here? I might have to do like look around, like one of these is not like the others. Is this the Negro History Month exhibit since February is right around? Like, KB, you go to the museum February. Oh, look, they got the bling. I can't do it. It does not get in, but they will. That's black culture. That's black Bismarcky. That's black culture. What I'm saying, really, you might be the odd person out, even if you're classified as black with 8 great-grandparents from Georgia. You might be the odd person out. What? That is not black culture. Shut your mouth. Man. Any hoodles, not to mention now how many feet got chopped off if this is authentic product. How many feet got chopped off in the Congo to get this here gold chain? We just focused on the authentic black America. Okay, got it. That's wrong exhibit. Got it. Any hoodles, we will be here. Since he did mention the alcohol segment, I don't know what the resistance would be. That's peculiar resistance even to me. If you say, well, drinking alcohol is a health problem, cancer causing even, and the response is, Why can't we talk about McDonald's and all that swine y'all eat? Okay, let's do that tomorrow. But first, let's get back to the liquor thing, and then we can do food too, because I do that. That's also carcinogenic. The swine, they got hot dogs. Yeah, that's 2 thumbs down. So we'll get to that tomorrow. But can we get back to the liquor thing? I know people like a cocktail for the new year. I'm very aware, and lots of other parties. As he said, all-star game, and I think that's going to be in Oakland this year. Got to drink it up and get some tequila for that. Might even have to pour a little bit of tequila out for Carter G. Woodson, Negro History Month. Always got an excuse to drink a little liquor. Sobriety for the people in Flint struggling to get water. Sobriety, they didn't even mention in that segment on the health risks associated with alcohol, and that was the Surgeon General. They didn't even mention, hey, if you're under 25, that's also major health risk, compromising the health development of your brain. Brain isn't done developing until you are about 25, maybe even a little older than that. So you also can't be drinking alcohol, and for you also it is 0. 0. Not teaspoon, 0. They didn't mention nothing about that, and that's so much of the consumption. I just posted that report. Now, in the midst of all of this, now they got the college football playoff. Now they sell liquor at the college football games. I was stunned. More than half of the students, undergrads at colleges, they are not drinking age. They are under 21. How do you have drinking sponsors? You're selling it in the stadiums and all that. How is that? System of white supremacy. That might even be another one that I say, clear my throat on Sue Klebold. White people do not care about children. Why would I be promoting all this liquor and such? You know, you got all these 18 and 19-year-olds. You got 18 and 19-year-olds on the field, much less in the stands. Whatever. Much obliged for tuning in. Hopefully worthy of your time and energy. First new year, or first weekend of the new year, so-called. Be constructive, sober with it. That just keeps, I've been saying it for years. Sobriety would be best. Under conditions of white supremacy. Really, even if it wasn't conditions of white supremacy racism, it would still be carcinogenic. So sobriety would still be best. Creator, we ask that you help us remain patient with other black people, victims of white supremacy. We ask that you help us remain patient with ourselves. Remind us to demonstrate the highest levels of black self-respect at all times, in all places, each and every time we are in contact with another black person. It has been time. Replace white supremacy with justice immediately. No name calling, no gossiping, no throwaway offspring. Cow signing out. Thanks all for tuning in.
Nigga, you so brainwashed. I'm a victim, brother. Problem. You're a victim. I'm a victim of 400 years of conditioning. Shut up. The man has programmed my conditioning. Even my conditioning has been conditioned.